What happens when a single father stops to help a stranger in a storm, only to discover she's a millionaire who will change his life forever? Daniel Hayes had no idea that offering a ride to a soaked woman on Maple Road would lead him into the world of luxury hotels, impossible second chances, and a connection that defied every boundary between their worlds. Stay until the end to see how one act of kindness rewrites two broken lives, and comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels. The rain came down like divine punishment that October evening. Sheets of water turning Maple Road into a river of blurred headlights and drowning gutters. Inside his 2008 Ford pickup, the one with the passenger door that stuck and the heater that only worked on the highest setting, Daniel Hayes squinted through a windshield the wipers couldn't quite clear, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Dad, I can't see anything," Maya said from the passenger seat, her small voice tight with worry. At 9 years old, she'd already learned to mask fear with quiet observation, a skill she'd inherited from watching her father navigate their life after her mother died. "We're almost home, sweetheart," Daniel assured her, though he could barely make out the road himself. The storm had blown in fast, one of those late autumn tempests that swallowed the sky and turned 6 o'clock into midnight. "How was piano practice?" "Mrs. Chen says I'm getting better at the Chopin piece." Maya clutched her sheet music folder against her chest like a shield. "She says Mom would be proud." Daniel's throat tightened. 3 years gone, and Catherine's absence still filled the truck like a fourth passenger. "She would be," he managed. "She is." The traffic light at Maple and Fifth flickered red, and as Daniel rolled to a stop, his headlights caught something that made him brake harder than necessary. A figure stood alone on the corner, barely visible through the downpour. A woman in what had probably been an elegant trench coat, now plastered to her frame. She held one shoe in her hand, the heel snapped clean off, and her other foot balanced awkwardly on the curb. In her free hand, a phone screen blinked red before going dark entirely. "Dad, there's someone out there," Maya said, leaning forward. Daniel had already seen her. Every instinct screamed at him to keep driving. He had a daughter to get home, a 10-hour shift at the warehouse starting at 5 a.m. Is in approximately $47 to last until Friday. The universe had taught him that getting involved meant complications, and complications meant trouble he couldn't afford. But Catherine's voice echoed in his memory, soft and certain. "We stop for people, Danny, always. Because someday, someone might need to stop for us." "Damn it," he muttered, pulling the truck to the curb with a splash that sent water cascading over the sidewalk. He rolled down the window, rain immediately soaking his left sleeve. "Ma'am, you need a lift?" The woman turned, and even through the storm, Daniel caught the flash of surprise in her eyes. She was younger than he'd first thought, maybe early 40s, with dark hair streaming water and makeup running in subtle tracks down her cheeks. There was something in her posture, even soaked and stranded, that suggested she wasn't used to needing help. She hesitated, and Daniel saw the calculation happen in real time. Strange man. Old truck. Dark night. Every woman's risk assessment in a single moment. "I have my daughter with me," he called out, gesturing to Maya, who waved from the passenger seat. "We can take you wherever you need to go. Can't leave you out in this." Something in his voice, or maybe Maya's small wave, decided it. The woman hurried to the truck, wrenching open the back door. It took 2 tries. Daniel made a mental note to oil those hinges, and climbing in with a gasp of relief. "Thank you," she breathed, her voice cultured even through the shivering. "I'm sorry, my car died, just stopped completely. And my driver," she trailed off, looking down at her phone's dark screen. "My phone's dead too, perfect timing." "Happens to the best of us," Daniel said, pulling back into traffic. He cranked the heat higher, even though it made the cab feel like a sauna. In the rearview mirror, he watched the woman try to compose herself, pushing wet hair back from her face with trembling fingers. "Where can I take you?" She paused, and Daniel caught something strange in her expression. Uncertainty? Vulnerability? "Do you know the Grandview Hotel downtown?" "Sure do." Daniel knew it well, a gleaming tower of glass and steel where he'd once applied for a maintenance job and been told they'd keep his resume on file, which everyone knew meant no. "That's about 20 minutes in this weather." "I can make it worth your trouble," the woman said quickly. I can pay. No need, Daniel cut her off gently. Like I said, happens to the best of us. I'm Daniel, by the way. Daniel Hayes. And this is my daughter, Maya. I'm... Another pause. Claire. Just Claire. Maya twisted in her seat to look back at their passenger. You were standing in the rain for a long time, weren't you? Your coat is really wet. Maya, Daniel warned softly, but Claire, just Claire, laughed, a sound that seemed to surprise her as much as it surprised him. I was, actually. I'm not sure how long. Time does funny things when you're stranded. She pulled the coat tighter around herself. Your daughter has good observational skills. Too good sometimes, Daniel said with a small smile, catching Maya's eye. His daughter grinned back at him, that gap-toothed smile that made every struggle worthwhile. They drove in relative silence for a few minutes, the rain drumming on the roof like impatient fingers. Daniel navigated the slick streets with the careful attention of someone who couldn't afford an accident. Not financially, not temporally, not in any way that mattered. The truck's heater rattled and wheezed, but it was working, filling the cab with warm air that smelled faintly of the pine air freshener dangling from the mirror. I'm sorry about the truck, Daniel found himself saying. She's not much, but she gets us where we need to go. Please don't apologize. Claire's voice was sharp, almost fierce. You stopped. That's more than... She caught herself. That's more than enough. In the mirror, Daniel saw her wipe at her face, and he wasn't entirely sure it was just rain anymore. Something had happened to this woman tonight. Something beyond a dead car and a broken heel. Something that had left her standing alone in a storm, looking lost in a way that had nothing to do with geography. Hey, Maya said suddenly, turning around again. Are you okay? You look sad. Maya Elizabeth Hayes, Daniel started, but Claire shook her head. It's all right. She met Maya's concerned gaze. You know what? I was feeling pretty sad. But then your dad stopped, and now I'm sitting in a warm truck instead of drowning on a street corner, so I think I'm getting better. Good, Maya said with the simple certainty of childhood. Sad is the worst. My dad says it's okay to be sad sometimes, but you can't stay there forever. You have to find something good, even if it's really small. Daniel felt his face flush. That's, some wisdom she's quoting at you. Sorry. Don't be sorry for that either, Claire said softly. It sounds like good wisdom to me. The traffic crawled through the storm. They passed abandoned cars, a fire truck with lights spinning, and at least 3 accidents being cleared by police. Daniel's fingers ached from gripping the wheel, and his mind was already calculating the cost of this detour, gas, time, the wear on the truck, but he pushed those thoughts aside. Catherine would have stopped. So he stopped. Can I ask you something? Claire said after a while. Sure. Why did you stop? Really? Her eyes met his in the mirror. Most people wouldn't have, especially not in weather like this, with your daughter in the car. You don't know me. I could be anyone. Daniel considered the question as they waited at another red light. My wife, Maya's mom, she used to say that we're all just one bad day away from needing help, that when someone's standing in the rain you offer them an umbrella, or in this case a truck that sounds like it's digesting bolts. He smiled faintly. She passed away 3 years ago, but I'm trying to raise Maya the way she would have wanted. That means stopping for people. Silence filled the truck, heavier than the rain. I'm very sorry about your wife, Claire said finally, her voice thick with something Daniel couldn't quite identify. She sounds like she was a remarkable person. She was. Daniel's voice cracked slightly. She really was. Maya reached over and squeezed her father's arm, their silent signal, the one they developed in the first terrible months after Catherine died, when words weren't enough. Daniel squeezed back. Where's your mom? Maya asked Claire, with the blunt directness of a child who'd learned that death made such questions acceptable. Maya? No, it's okay. Claire leaned forward slightly. My mother passed away too, a long time ago. And my father, well, we're not close, so I understand a little bit about loss. We can be loss buddies, Maya declared. That's what Dad calls us. Loss buddies. Because we both lost someone, but we have each other. Daniel watched Claire's reflection in the mirror as she processed this, saw something shift in her expression, a cracking of whatever careful mask she'd been wearing. "Lost buddies," she repeated. "I like that." The rain began to ease as they approached downtown. The storm's fury spent as quickly as it had arrived. Buildings rose around them, growing taller and more expensive with each block. The Grandview Hotel emerged from the mist like a glass monument to wealth, its lobby glowing with golden light. Daniel pulled up to the curved driveway where a doorman in a burgundy uniform stood under an awning trying to flag down taxis that weren't coming. "Here you go, safe and sound." Claire didn't move to get out. She sat there staring at the hotel with an expression Daniel couldn't read. Finally she spoke. "Would you, both of you, would you come inside for a moment? Let me buy you something warm to drink. It's the least I can do." Daniel checked his watch, an old Timex with a cracked crystal. It was already past 7. Maya had homework and he had to prep his lunch for tomorrow, and probably should have been in bed an hour ago given his wake-up time. "Please," Claire added, and there was something almost desperate in her voice. I'm not ready to be alone yet, and I'd like to do something nice for the people who were nice to me." Daniel looked at Maya, who nodded eagerly. Against his better judgment, against every practical bone in his body, he found himself nodding too. "Okay, but nothing fancy. We're not exactly dressed for the Grandview." "You're dressed perfectly," Claire said firmly. She climbed out of the truck, no longer shivering, and waited as Daniel found a parking spot in the guest lot. The parking attendant gave the old Ford a dubious look, but said nothing. They followed Claire through the gleaming lobby, Maya's eyes wide as she took in the marble floors and crystal chandeliers. Daniel felt acutely aware of his worn jeans and work jacket, the way his boots squeaked on the polished stone. A couple in elegant evening wear gave them a disdainful glance as they passed. But Claire moved through the space with unexpected confidence, heading toward what looked like a small cafe off the main lobby. The hostess started to speak, probably to tell them they needed reservations or proper attire, but Claire simply said, "Table for 3, please, Martha." And the woman's objection died on her lips. "Of course, Ms." The hostess caught herself. "Of course. Right this way." They were seated in a corner booth, menus appearing as if by magic. Daniel scanned the prices and felt his stomach drop. $18 for a cup of soup, $22 for a sandwich. What kind of place charged these prices for basic food? "Order anything you want," Claire said, noticing his hesitation. "Truly, it's on me." "The hot chocolate here is amazing," Maya whispered to her father. "Can I?" "Sure, baby." Daniel closed his menu. "I'll just have coffee, black." "You should eat something," Claire pressed. "When did you last have a meal?" Daniel thought about the protein bar he'd inhaled between jobs around noon. "I'm fine, really." Claire caught the server's attention. 3 of the French onion soups, a grilled cheese for the young lady, a club sandwich for the gentleman, and a chef's salad for me, plus hot chocolate for her, coffee for him, and I'll have tea. "Claire, that's too much. It's a thank you," she said simply. "Let me say thank you properly." As they waited for the food, Maya chattered about her piano lessons, about school, about her best friend Emma, who'd just gotten a puppy. Claire listened with genuine attention, asking questions that made Maya light up even more. Daniel watched the interaction with a mix of gratitude and caution. There was something about this woman, something that didn't quite add up. The way the staff treated her, the ease with which she'd ordered expensive food. The fact that she'd been standing on a street corner in the rain when she clearly could have afforded any car service in the city. The food arrived, and it was as good as it was overpriced. Maya's eyes rolled back in pleasure at the hot chocolate, which came topped with real whipped cream and shaved chocolate. Daniel's soup was rich and perfectly seasoned, the sandwich piled high with turkey and bacon. Despite his protests, he found himself eating with an appetite he hadn't realized he had. "So what do you do, Daniel?" Claire asked, cradling her tea. "For work?" "Warehouse logistics at Belmont Distribution," he said between bites. "Night shift supervisor. And I do some handyman work on weekends. Repairs, maintenance, that kind of thing." 2 jobs. It wasn't a question. "Piano lessons aren't cheap," he said, smiling at Maya. "And neither is keeping a 9-year-old in shoes that fit. She grows like a weed." "I'm going to be taller than you, Dad says," Maya announced proudly. Your mother was 5'10", Daniel explained. So yeah, probably. Claire set down her tea. It must be difficult, managing everything alone. Daniel shrugged, uncomfortable with the sympathy in her voice. You do what you have to do. Maya's worth it. Besides, I'm not alone. I've got her. And I've got him, Maya added, reaching over to steal a pickle from his plate. We're a team. I can see that. Claire's smile was gentle. You're very lucky to have each other. They talked for another hour, the conversation flowing more easily than Daniel would have expected. Claire asked about Maya's school, about Daniel's handyman business. He hesitated to call it a business. It was really just word-of-mouth repairs for neighbors. She laughed at Maya's stories and listened intently when Daniel talked about his late wife. But she revealed almost nothing about herself, deflecting personal questions with the skill of someone practiced at maintaining privacy. Finally, Maya's head began to droop against her father's shoulder. Time to get this one home, Daniel said, signaling for the check. Already taken care of, Claire said. Claire, please. She held up a hand. You gave me something much more valuable than a ride tonight. You gave me kindness when I needed it most. You reminded me that there are still good people in the world. Let me do this small thing. Daniel wanted to argue, but the exhaustion in her eyes stopped him. Whatever had happened to her before he'd pulled over, it had been significant. He could see the weight of it in the set of her shoulders, the tightness around her mouth. Thank you, he said simply, for the food and for spending time with us. I hope whatever was wrong earlier gets better. I think it already has, Claire said softly. She stood as they prepared to leave. Daniel, She paused, seeming to struggle with something. I know this might sound strange, but could I give you my number? In case you or Maya ever need anything. A favor returned, so to speak. Daniel almost laughed at the absurdity of it. What could this woman in her designer coat, ruined though it was, possibly need from a warehouse supervisor with a truck held together by prayer and duct tape? But something in her expression, a kind of lonely hope, made him pull out his phone. Sure, he said, typing in the number she recited. And hey, if you ever need a ride in a rainstorm again, you know who to call. Claire's laugh was warmer this time, more genuine. I just might take you up on that. They left her standing in the cafe, watching them go with an expression Daniel couldn't quite read. In the lobby, Maya tugged on his hand. Dad, I really like her. She's sad like us, but she's nice. Yeah, baby, she is nice. Do you think we'll see her again? Daniel looked back toward the cafe where Claire had already disappeared from view. I don't know. Maybe. But as he lifted Maya into the truck and navigated back out into the now quiet streets, he found himself thinking about the strange encounter, about the woman named Claire who'd stood in the rain, about the way she'd looked at them, at him and Maya, like they were something precious and rare. He didn't know her last name, didn't know what had brought her to that street corner, or why a woman who clearly had money had been stranded without help, didn't know if he'd ever see her again. What he did know was that Catherine would have approved of his choice to stop. And somehow, that meal in the Grandview Hotel cafe, with his daughter happy and a stranger becoming less strange, had felt like the first moment in 3 years where the world had gotten a little bit lighter. The rain had stopped completely by the time they reached home, a small 2-bedroom apartment above a grocery store in a neighborhood the city planners called transitional and everyone else called rough around the edges. Daniel carried a sleeping Maya up the stairs, laid her in bed without waking her, and then collapsed onto his own mattress with a groan. His phone buzzed with a reminder. Wake up in 7 hours. He closed his eyes, the taste of French onion soup still on his tongue, the memory of Claire's grateful smile flickering behind his eyelids. Tomorrow would bring another shift, another day of juggling bills and responsibilities and the relentless weight of single parenthood. But tonight, he'd stopped for someone in the rain. Tonight, he'd done what Catherine would have done. And as sleep pulled him under, Daniel Hayes had no idea that the woman he'd helped, the woman named Just Claire, was going to walk back into his life in exactly 3 days and change absolutely everything. He had no idea that she wasn't just wealthy, but millionaire wealthy. Hotel empire wealthy. Change your life with a signature wealthy. He had no idea that his act of simple human kindness was about to become the hinge upon which both their futures would swing. He had no idea that sometimes the universe doesn't just test your character in the storm. Sometimes it rewards it. But first, there would be a job interview, and a revelation, and the moment when Daniel Hayes would walk into an office and realize that the soaked stranger from the rain wasn't a stranger at all. She was Claire Whitmore, and she was about to offer him much more than just a job. The alarm clock's shrill beeping dragged Daniel from a dream where he was back in that cafe, except Catherine was there too, sitting across from Claire, the two women laughing about something he couldn't quite hear. He slapped the snooze button and lay there in the darkness, his body protesting the 4 hours of sleep it had gotten. Outside his window, the city was still black, stars barely visible through the light pollution. 4:30 in the morning. Time to be a warehouse supervisor. He showered in 3 minutes, a skill he'd perfected over 3 years of single fatherhood, and dressed in the dim light of the bathroom so he wouldn't wake Maya. In the kitchen, he made coffee so strong it could strip paint, packed the same lunch he packed every day. Peanut butter sandwich, apple granola bar, and scribbled a note for Maya that Mrs. Chen from downstairs would find when she came up at 7 to help get her ready for school. Have a great day at school, sweetheart. Remember, you're having dinner at Emma's tonight. I'll pick you up at 8. Love you more than all the stars. Dad. He left the note on the counter, weighted down by the ceramic mug Maya had made him for Father's Day, the one that said "World's Okayest Dad" in crooked letters. She'd been so proud of that joke. The truck started on the third try, coughing exhaust into the pre-dawn air. Daniel drove through empty streets to Belmont Distribution, a massive warehouse complex on the industrial edge of the city where 18-wheelers came and went at all hours and the fluorescent lights never dimmed. He clocked in at 4:58, grabbed his clipboard, and prepared for another 10-hour shift of inventory management, forklift supervision, and the endless Tetris game of loading and unloading trucks. "Hayes, you look like hell," his supervisor Marcus said by way of greeting. "Rough night?" "Long night," Daniel corrected, gulping coffee, "but not rough." "Well, wake up fast. We've got 3 trucks behind schedule and corporate's breathing down my neck about efficiency metrics again." Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. "You know the drill." Daniel knew the drill. He spent the next 10 hours moving through the warehouse like a man possessed, checking manifests, directing crews, troubleshooting problems with the loading dock's ancient conveyor system. His mind wanted to drift back to the night before, to Claire's face in the rearview mirror, to that strange dinner in the Grandview, but he forced himself to focus. One wrong move in a warehouse could mean injury. Distraction was a luxury he couldn't afford. By the time his shift ended at 3, his back ached and his feet throbbed and he smelled like cardboard and diesel fuel. He had exactly 2 hours before he needed to pick up Maya from Emma's house, which meant 2 hours to shower, change, and maybe, if he was lucky, close his eyes for 20 minutes. He was halfway to his truck when his phone rang. Unknown number. Daniel almost didn't answer. Unknown numbers meant spam calls about his car's extended warranty or debt consolidation loans he didn't need. But something made him swipe to accept. "Hello? Daniel?" The voice was tentative, feminine, and somehow familiar. "This is Claire. From last night. The woman in the rain." Daniel stopped walking, standing in the middle of the parking lot as a forklift beeped past him. "Claire, hi. I didn't expect... Is everything okay?" "Yes, everything's fine. I'm sorry to call out of the blue like this. I hope I'm not interrupting anything." She sounded nervous, which seemed impossible for the composed woman who'd navigated the Grandview staff with such ease. "Just finished work. What's up?" There was a pause, and Daniel could hear her take a breath. "I have a strange question, and please feel free to say no. But you mentioned last night that you do handyman work, repairs, maintenance, that sort of thing?" "Yeah, weekends mostly. And some evenings if the job's not too big." "Would you be interested in taking a look at some properties for me? I have a few buildings that need assessment. The current maintenance company is pricing things in a way that seems excessive, and I'd like a second opinion from someone who actually knows what they're talking about." Daniel leaned against his truck, suspicious and curious in equal measure. "What kind of properties are we talking about?" "Commercial buildings, downtown." Another pause. Hotels, specifically. I own 3 of them, and the maintenance contracts are bleeding me dry. I need someone who will be honest about what actually needs fixing versus what they're just trying to upsell me on. Hotels, plural. Daniel's mind raced, recalculating everything he thought he knew about the woman from the rain. You own 3 hotels downtown? It's a family business, Claire said quickly. Look, I know this is weird. I know I'm essentially a stranger asking you to consult on property worth millions of dollars based on one ride in a rainstorm. But Daniel, you were kind to me when you didn't have to be. You didn't want anything from me, and that's so rare in my world that I'm willing to trust my instinct that you're someone I can trust. Daniel thought about his bank account, thought about the stack of bills on his kitchen counter, thought about Maya's piano teacher gently suggesting that maybe Maya should consider the local music conservatory's youth program, $1,500 a semester. He thought about his truck's transmission, which was making a grinding noise that promised expensive repairs in the near future. What does the consultation pay? He asked. $200 an hour, and I'd estimate maybe 10 hours of work to review all 3 properties thoroughly. Plus, I'll cover any travel expenses and provide meals during the walkthroughs. $2,000. Daniel's mouth went dry. That was nearly a month's worth of groceries. That was the truck repair with money left over. That was breathing room he hadn't had in years. When would you need me to start? He could hear the smile in her voice. Are you free this Saturday? I can be. Maya had a play date that afternoon anyway. What time? 10 a.m.? I can meet you at the first property, the Grandview, where we had dinner last night. They made the arrangements, and after they hung up, Daniel sat in his truck for a long moment, staring at his phone. $200 an hour. For work he knew how to do, work he actually enjoyed. It felt too good to be true, which meant it probably was. But Catherine's voice whispered in his memory. Sometimes you have to trust that good things can happen too, Danny. He started the truck and headed home to shower off the warehouse grime, his mind already cataloging the tools he'd need to bring, the things he should look for in commercial property assessments. He'd done residential work for years, but commercial was different, bigger systems, more complex problems, higher stakes. By the time he picked up Maya from Emma's house that evening, he'd half convinced himself he'd imagined the phone call entirely. Dad, you seem happy, Maya observed as they drove home, her backpack full of homework she'd hopefully already finished. Did something good happen? Maybe, he said carefully. He'd learned not to get her hopes up about extra money until it was actually in the bank. Remember that woman from last night, Claire? The sad one we had dinner with? Yeah. She called me today. She wants to hire me to look at some buildings she owns, give her advice about repairs and maintenance. Maya's eyes widened. Like your handyman stuff? Exactly like that. Just bigger buildings. Is she going to pay you a lot? The question was casual, but Daniel heard the hope underneath it. Maya was 9. She understood that money was tight, even if she didn't fully grasp the math of poverty. She's going to pay me fairly, Daniel said, which is all I can ask for. They stopped for tacos at the truck near their apartment, $2 each, the cheapest dinner option that didn't involve the ramen noodles they'd been eating 3 times a week. Maya chattered about her day, about the science project she had to do, about how Emma's mom had said maybe Maya could come to the beach with them next summer if it was okay with her dad. We'll see, Daniel said automatically, which they both knew meant probably not because we can't afford it. That night, after Maya was asleep and the apartment was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the muffled bass from the college students downstairs, Daniel pulled out his laptop, a refurbished model from 5 years ago that ran like it was held together with hope, and did something he should have done the night before. He Googled Claire Whitmore hotels. The results made his stomach drop. Claire Whitmore wasn't just wealthy. She was Forbes 30 under 30 wealthy. Business Insider profile, wealthy. Inherited hotel empire and tripled its value, wealthy. The Whitmore family owned not 3 hotels, but 7 across the eastern seaboard, with the 3 downtown properties being their flagship locations. Her late mother had built the business from a single boutique hotel, and her father, from whom she was apparently estranged, had remarried and moved to Monaco. There were photos of her at charity galas in gowns that probably cost more than his truck. Photos of her shaking hands with the mayor, with CEOs, with celebrities passing through the city. In every image, she looked polished and powerful and completely unlike the woman who'd sat shivering in his back seat with a broken heel in her hand. Daniel closed the laptop and sat in the darkness, processing. She hadn't lied to him exactly. She'd just let him think she was someone much smaller than she actually was. And now she was offering him $200 an hour to consult on properties worth tens of millions of dollars. Why? The question kept him awake long after he should have been sleeping. Why would someone like Claire Whitmore hire a warehouse supervisor to assess her hotels? She could afford the best contractors in the city. She could fly in experts from New York or Los Angeles. She had resources Daniel couldn't even imagine. Unless she was telling the truth about wanting someone honest, someone who wouldn't try to upsell her or take advantage, someone who'd stopped for her in the rain without knowing who she was. He thought about the way she'd looked at him and Maya in that cafe, the loneliness in her eyes when Maya had declared them lost buddies, the way she'd said his name, Daniel, like it mattered. Maybe she just needed someone real in a world of people who wanted something from her. Or maybe he was being naive, and this was all some elaborate setup for something he couldn't see coming. Either way, he needed the money too badly to turn it down. Saturday arrived wrapped in autumn sunshine, the kind of crisp October morning that made the city look almost beautiful. Daniel dropped Maya off at Emma's house at 9:30, made sure he had his tool bag and his notebook, and drove downtown with his heart hammering against his ribs. The Grandview looked different in daylight, less magical, more obviously expensive. He parked in the guest lot again, grabbed his bag, and was walking toward the entrance when his phone buzzed. Claire. Come around to the service entrance on the east side. I'll meet you there. He followed the building's perimeter until he found a plain door marked Authorized Personnel Only and knocked. It opened immediately, and there was Claire, but not the Claire from the rain or even the composed Claire from the cafe. This Claire wore jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, minimal makeup. She looked younger, more accessible, more like someone who might actually need his help. Daniel? She said, and her smile was genuine. Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would. 200 an hour is pretty persuasive, he said honestly. She laughed. I appreciate the candor. Come on, I'll show you around. The service areas of the Grandview were a different world from the lobby. Concrete floors, industrial lighting, the smell of chlorine and cleaning supplies. Claire led him through a maze of corridors, pointing out mechanical rooms, storage areas, the massive laundry facility that processed thousands of pounds of linens daily. The maintenance company is telling me we need to replace the entire HVAC system, she said, as they stood in a mechanical room that hummed with machinery. They're quoting me at $300,000. Does that sound right to you? Daniel set down his tool bag and approached the units, running his hands over the ductwork, checking the connections, examining the age stamps on the equipment. He pulled out a flashlight and crouched to inspect the base, looking for rust or water damage. How old is the system? He asked. 12 years. And what problems are they saying justify a full replacement? Claire consulted her phone. Inefficient operation, outdated refrigerant, pending EPA regulations, and potential catastrophic failure. Daniel stood up, wiping his hands on his jeans. Okay, so here's what I'm seeing. Yes, this system is older, and yes, the refrigerant they used is being phased out. But the units themselves are well maintained, no significant rust. The motors sound good, the ductwork is clean. He pointed to various components as he spoke. What you probably need is a retrofit on the refrigerant system, maybe 40, 50,000, and then you're good for another 5 to 10 years easy. A full replacement at this point is overkill unless you're trying to reduce operating costs long term, but even then your ROI wouldn't hit for 15 years. Claire stared at him. So they're trying to upsell me by $250,000? Essentially, yeah. It's not uncommon. Commercial contracts are where these companies make their real money, and most property owners don't know enough to push back. She pulled out a tablet and started making notes, her fingers flying across the screen. What about the boiler system? They want to replace that too. They spent the next 4 hours going through the Grandview from top to bottom. Daniel checked the roof, the foundation, the plumbing, the electrical panels. He found things that needed attention. A water heater that was genuinely at end of life. Some sketchy wiring in an older wing that was a fire hazard waiting to happen. a drainage issue in the basement that would cause problems if not addressed. But he also found dozens of items on the maintenance company's proposal that were pure profit padding. "You're getting robbed," he said finally as they sat in a small office reviewing his notes. "Not on everything. Some of this work is legitimate, but I'd estimate that maybe 40% of what they're proposing is either unnecessary or wildly overpriced." Claire leaned back in her chair, looking simultaneously furious and vindicated. "I knew it. I knew something felt wrong about those proposals, but everyone kept telling me I just didn't understand commercial maintenance." She fixed him with an intense gaze. "Daniel, how would you like a job?" He nearly dropped his coffee. "What?" "A job. Here, at the Grandview, head of maintenance. Bei Diemsel. You clearly know what you're talking about, you're honest, and you actually care about doing things right instead of doing things expensively." "Claire, I appreciate that, but I'm not qualified to run maintenance for a hotel this size. I fix leaky faucets and patch drywall on weekends. This is a completely different scale." "So you'll learn. I'll pay you $75,000 a year to start, full benefits, and I'll send you to whatever training programs you need to get up to speed on commercial systems." She was leaning forward now, animated in a way he hadn't seen before. "Look, I know this sounds crazy, but I've been running these hotels for 3 years since my mother died, and I've been constantly fighting with contractors who think they can take advantage of me because I'm young and female and don't have a technical background. I need someone on my team who I can trust, someone who will tell me the truth even when it's not what I want to hear." Daniel's mind reeled. $75,000. That was almost double what he made working 2 jobs. That was Maya in the conservatory program with money left over. That was fixing the truck and maybe even saving for college. "I have a daughter," he said slowly. "I'd need reasonable hours. I can't work nights regularly." "We'll make it work. Most maintenance issues that can't wait happen during business hours anyway, and you'd have a team under you for emergencies. I only have a high school diploma and some vocational training. I have an MBA from Stanford, and I still need you to tell me whether my HVAC system is dying. Credentials aren't everything." He thought about the warehouse, about Marcus writing him about efficiency metrics, about the fluorescent lights and the diesel smell and the way his body ached after every shift, about coming home too tired to really listen to Maya's stories about school. "Can I think about it?" he asked. Claire nodded. "Of course. Take the weekend." "But Daniel?" She reached across the desk and touched his hand briefly. "You helped me when I was stranded. Let me help you now. Not because I owe you, but because I think this could be good for both of us." They finished the walkthrough of the other 2 properties over the next few hours. The Fitzgerald on 5th had a legitimate roof issue that needed immediate attention, but was otherwise solid. The Sterling near the theater district needed its elevator system updated and had some ADA compliance issues, but again, nothing like the catastrophic overhauls the maintenance company proposed. By the time Daniel headed home to pick up Maya, his head was spinning and his notebook was full, and he had a check for $2,000 in his pocket that felt like it might be made of dreams. "How did it go?" Maya asked when he collected her from Emma's house, her face flushed from whatever game they'd been playing. "It went really well, actually." Daniel pulled out onto the street, his mind still half in those mechanical rooms, half in the impossible possibility of Claire's job offer. "She liked my work." "Are you going to see her again?" Daniel thought about the way Claire had looked at him when she'd offered the position, hopeful and determined and maybe a little desperate. "Yeah, baby. I think I probably am." That night, after Maya was asleep, he pulled out his laptop again and researched maintenance manager positions at commercial properties. The responsibilities, the qualifications, the reality of what Claire was offering. It should have been intimidating. It should have sent him running back to the safety of his warehouse job where he knew exactly what each day would bring. Instead, he found himself thinking about Catherine, about how she'd always pushed him to dream bigger, to believe he was capable of more than he thought, about how she'd died in a car accident on her way to a job interview for a position she was technically underqualified for but had applied for anyway because she believed in growth over safety. "What would you tell me to do?" he whispered to the empty apartment, to the ghost of his wife that still lived in the walls. "Would you tell me I'm crazy for considering this?" The refrigerator hummed. The college students downstairs laughed about something. The city breathed its endless urban rhythm outside his window. And in the silence, Daniel thought he knew the answer. Catherine would tell him to take the leap. She would tell him that sometimes the universe puts opportunities in your path specifically because you're ready for them, even if you don't feel ready. She would tell him to stop for people in the rain and accept when people stop for you. On Sunday morning, he called Claire. "I'll take the job," he said, standing in his kitchen with his hands shaking slightly. "If the offer's still open." "It's absolutely still open." He could hear the smile in her voice. "When can you start?" "I need to give 2 weeks' notice at the warehouse, so 2 weeks from Monday?" "Perfect. Come by the Grandview Tuesday evening and we'll do the paperwork." "Daniel?" "Yeah?" "Thank you for taking a chance on this. On me." "I think we're both taking a chance," he said. "But yeah, let's see where it goes." After he hung up, Daniel stood in his kitchen for a long moment, processing what he'd just agreed to. Then he walked to Maya's room where she was working on her science project at her desk, her tongue sticking out in concentration the way it always did when she was focused. "Hey, sweetheart." She looked up. "Yeah, Dad?" "How would you feel about me getting a new job? One where I'd be home for dinner every night and wouldn't have to work weekends as much?" Maya's face transformed, hope blooming like sunrise. "Really? Really? I'd be working at that hotel, the Grandview, where we met Claire. I'd be in charge of fixing things and making sure everything runs smoothly." "Would we have more money?" The question was tentative, like she was afraid to ask. Daniel crouched beside her chair. "We'd have enough. Maybe not rich, but enough that you wouldn't have to worry about things as much. Enough that if Emma's family invites you to the beach next summer, we can say yes." Maya threw her arms around his neck, squeezing so hard he could barely breathe. "That's the best news ever, Dad. The best." He held his daughter and felt something shift in his chest, the constant low-level anxiety that had been his companion for 3 years easing just slightly. Not gone, never gone, but less sharp, less immediately threatening. On Tuesday evening, he walked into the Grandview's administrative offices wearing the one dress shirt he owned and the slacks he'd bought for Catherine's funeral. Claire met him with a warm handshake and introduced him to Ellen from HR, a brisk woman in her 50s who had him fill out enough paperwork to deforest a small country. "You'll start on the 24th, Ellen said, processing his I-9 form. "First week will be orientation and training. Claire's arranged for you to shadow our current maintenance supervisor before he retires. He's been here 30 years, so pick his brain about everything." "Retiring?" Daniel looked at Claire in surprise. "I thought I was replacing a company." "You are," Claire said. "But Thomas has been wanting to retire for 2 years. I'm just finally in a position to let him, now that I have someone trustworthy to take over the in-house operations. We'll still contract out for major projects, but day-to-day maintenance will be your domain." They talked logistics for another hour. Salary, benefits, schedule expectations. Daniel would work primarily at the Grandview but would rotate through all 3 properties weekly. He'd have a team of 4 people under him: electrician, plumber, general maintenance, and housekeeping liaison. He'd have a budget, a company phone, and access to a work van for running between properties. It felt surreal. It felt like someone else's life. When the paperwork was done, Claire walked him back to the service entrance where he'd parked. The October evening was cool, the sky turning purple with dusk. "I meant what I said," Claire told him, stopping by his truck. "About being grateful you stopped that night. I was having one of the worst days of my life, and you—" She broke off, looking away. "You and Maya reminded me that kindness still exists. That seemed important to remember." "What happened?" Daniel asked gently. "That night? You never said." Claire was quiet for a moment, her arms wrapped around herself against the chill. "My father called that morning for the first time in 2 years, not to check on me, not to ask how the business was doing, but to inform me that he was challenging my mother's will, claiming she wasn't of sound mind when she left everything to me instead of him." Her voice was bitter. "So I'd spent the entire day with lawyers, listening to them tear apart my mother's memory and my right to run the business she built. And then my car died, and my driver had quit that morning without telling me. And my phone died, and I was just standing there in the rain thinking that I'd never felt more alone in my entire life. Jesus, Claire, I'm sorry. And then this truck pulled over," she continued, looking at him now with eyes that shone in the parking lot lights. And this man with kind eyes and a daughter who understood about being sad gave me a ride and bought me dinner and didn't want anything from me except to make sure I wasn't freezing on a street corner. So yeah, I'm grateful. More than you probably realize. Daniel didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to respond to the raw honesty in her voice. So he did what felt right. He stepped forward and pulled her into a brief, awkward hug. She stiffened for half a second, then relaxed against him, her face pressed into his shoulder. "You're not alone," he said quietly, "and your mother would be proud of you for fighting for what she built." When they separated, Claire was wiping at her eyes. "Sorry, I don't usually—" "Don't apologize for being human," Daniel interrupted. "We're all just doing our best down here." She laughed, a watery sound. "Lost buddies, right? That's what Maya called us." "Lost buddies," he agreed. "Now I should get home before Maya sends out a search party." He climbed into his truck, his old, familiar truck that had carried him through 3 years of grief and struggle, and drove home through the city streets. But this time, the future felt different, less like an endless tunnel and more like a road opening up ahead, full of possibilities he'd stopped letting himself imagine. When he got home, Maya was on the couch with Mrs. Chen, watching some cartoon about talking dogs. "How'd it go, Dad?" "It went great." He collapsed beside her, letting her curl into his side. 2 weeks, and we start a whole new chapter." "Will you like your new job?" "I think so. It's going to be different. Probably scary at first, but good different. Good scary." Maya nodded against his shoulder. "Like when we first moved here after Mom died. It was scary, but we did it anyway." "Exactly like that." They sat there as the cartoon played on, Mrs. Chen letting herself out with a gentle pat on Daniel's shoulder. The apartment was small and the couch was old and the television was from a decade ago, but it was theirs. They'd built this life from the wreckage of the old one, and now, impossibly, it was about to get better. All because he'd stopped in the rain. All because Catherine had taught him that you help people when they need it, because someday you might need help too. All because a woman named Claire had been standing on a corner with a broken heel, and he'd made the choice to pull over instead of drive past. Outside the window, the city sparkled with evening lights. Somewhere in one of those buildings, Claire Whitmore was probably working late, reviewing budgets or fighting with her father's lawyers or doing whatever it was that millionaire hotel owners did with their evenings. And in 2 weeks, Daniel Hayes, warehouse supervisor, single father, occasional handyman, would walk into the Grandview Hotel not as a guest or a stranger, but as an employee. As someone with a stake in keeping those buildings running, those guests happy, those mechanical systems humming along. It should have been terrifying. Maybe it was. But it also felt like the first truly good thing that had happened since Catherine died, and Daniel had learned not to question gifts when they arrived. The 2 weeks passed in a blur of final warehouse shifts and mounting anticipation. Daniel worked his notice with quiet efficiency, training his replacement and tying up loose ends while Marcus complained about losing his best supervisor. On his last day, the crew surprised him with a cake from the grocery store bakery and a card signed by everyone, even the guys who barely spoke English. It was touching in a way that made his throat tight. "You're making a mistake, Hayes," Marcus said as they shook hands in the parking lot at the end of that final shift. "Warehouse work is steady. Hotels go under all the time." "Maybe," Daniel replied, hefting his box of personal items, a coffee mug, a jacket, 3 years of accumulated odds and ends. "But sometimes you have to take the risk." Marcus shrugged. "Your funeral. Good luck anyway." Daniel drove away from Belmont Distribution at 3 in the afternoon for the last time, the October sun slanting through his windshield, and felt something between relief and terror settle in his gut. No more 4:30 alarms, no more diesel smell embedded in his clothes, no more fluorescent lights buzzing overhead while he counted pallets and filed reports. But also no more certainty. No more knowing exactly what each day would bring. He spent the weekend preparing, buying work boots that didn't have holes in the soles, getting his hair cut at the cheap place on 4th Street, reviewing the employee handbook Ellen had sent him via email. Maya watched him with barely contained excitement, asking questions he couldn't always answer. "Will you have an office, Dad?" "I think so. Small one, probably." "Will you wear a uniform?" "Work clothes. Not exactly a uniform." "Will Claire be your boss?" That one made him pause. Technically, yes, but it's not like that. It's complicated. Maya grinned at him, that knowing smile that made her look far older than 9. You like her. She's nice, Daniel said carefully. And she gave me a job. Of course I like her. No, I mean, you like her, like Mom used to say about people on her shows. Daniel felt his face heat. Maya, that's not... Claire is my boss. She's way out of my league. She's a millionaire who owns hotels and goes to fancy parties. I'm just some guy who knows how to fix things. You're not just some guy. Maya's voice went serious. You're the best guy, and you're not bad looking. Mrs. Chen says you could get a girlfriend if you tried. Mrs. Chen needs to mind her business, Daniel muttered, but he was smiling. And I'm not looking for a girlfriend. I've got you, and now I've got a new job. That's plenty to focus on. But that night, alone in his room with the apartment quiet, Daniel found himself thinking about Claire anyway, about the way she'd looked at him in that parking lot, vulnerable and grateful, about her laugh in the cafe, about her careful questions during the property walkthrough, about how she'd offered him not just a job but a chance at something better. He wasn't naive enough to think there was anything romantic there. She was Claire Whitmore, featured in magazines, photographed at galas, moving in circles so far above his that they might as well be different atmospheres. And he was Daniel Hayes, single father with a decade-old truck and a bank account that had 4 digits only if you counted the cents. But he couldn't deny that something had sparked between them, some connection that went beyond employer and employee, beyond the woman in the rain and the man who'd stopped. Some recognition of shared loneliness, shared loss, shared understanding that life was harder than it should be and kindness was rarer than it ought to be. Stop it, he told himself firmly. You need this job. Don't screw it up by developing feelings for your boss. Monday morning arrived with unseasonable warmth, the kind of Indian summer day that made people forget winter was coming. Daniel dropped Maya at school, drove downtown with his stomach churning, and parked in the employee lot behind the Grandview at 8:45. He was 15 minutes early, but he'd always been early. Catherine used to tease him about it. The service entrance felt less intimidating now that he had a legitimate reason to use it. He pressed the buzzer, and a heavy-set man in his 60s opened it with a broad smile. You must be Daniel. I'm Thomas Riley, the poor bastard you're replacing. His handshake was firm, his Boston accent thick. Come on, I'll show you around before the vultures from corporate descend. Thomas was a revelation. 30 years of hotel maintenance condensed into a walking encyclopedia of practical knowledge. He led Daniel through the warren of service corridors, introducing him to each system with the ease of long familiarity. This here's the main electrical panel, but don't touch it unless you absolutely have to. We've got a contract with Hanson Electric for the dangerous stuff. Thomas pointed to various breakers. This controls the West Wing. This is the conference facilities. This is the kitchen. You lose power to the kitchen during a wedding, and you'll wish you'd never been born. They spent the morning reviewing emergency procedures, equipment maintenance schedules, and the particular quirks of buildings that were 60 years old but pretended to be modern. The Grandview had been renovated 5 times, each era leaving its architectural fingerprints, and Thomas knew every hidden pipe and secret access panel. The key, Thomas said as they stood in yet another mechanical room, is prevention. These corporate types always want to wait until something breaks before they fix it, but you can't run a luxury hotel that way. Guests paying $400 a night don't want to hear that the AC's busted or the elevator's out. You anticipate problems. You maintain proactively. You keep everything humming so smooth they never notice you exist. That's my philosophy too, Daniel said, making notes in the small notebook he'd brought. Fix small problems before they become big ones. Then you'll do fine. Thomas clapped him on the shoulder. Claire made a good choice bringing you in. Between you and me, she's been getting killed by that maintenance company. They've been gouging her since her mother died, and she knew it but didn't have the technical knowledge to fight back. Having someone in-house who actually gives a damn will save her a fortune. How well do you know her? Daniel asked, trying to sound casual. Thomas gave him a shrewd look. Well enough to know she's a good person stuck in a difficult situation. Her mother, Victoria Whitmore, now there was a woman, built this whole business from nothing, started with a bed and breakfast in Newport, turned it into an empire. Claire worshipped her. When Victoria died, it nearly broke her, and then her father showed his true colors, and that finished the job. She mentioned he's contesting the will. Contesting it, dragging her through the courts, telling anyone who'll listen that she's too young and inexperienced to run the business. Never mind that she has an MBA from Stanford and worked in every department of these hotels since she was 16. Thomas shook his head in disgust. Richard Whitmore is a piece of work. Married Victoria for her money, spent 20 years taking credit for her success, and then threw a fit when she left it all to their daughter instead of him. Daniel felt a protective anger rise in his chest. That's awful. It is. But Claire's tougher than she looks. She'll fight him and win. You wait and see. Thomas checked his watch. Speaking of which, she wanted to meet with both of us at 11 to go over the transition plan. We should head up. They took the service elevator to the 4th floor, where the administrative offices occupied a suite of rooms that overlooked the city. Thomas led him through a reception area where a young woman at a desk smiled at them, down a hallway lined with black and white photographs of the hotels throughout their history, and stopped at a door marked C. Whitmore, Managing Director. Thomas knocked, and Claire's voice called, "Come in." She sat behind a desk that looked like it cost more than Daniel's truck, sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows behind her. She'd traded the casual sweater and jeans for business attire, a charcoal suit that was simultaneously professional and elegant. But when she saw Daniel, her formal expression softened into a genuine smile. "Daniel, welcome to your first official day." She stood and came around the desk to shake his hand, and Daniel caught a hint of her perfume, something subtle and expensive that made him very aware of the fact that he'd used dollar store deodorant that morning. "How's Thomas treating you?" "Like a student who needs to learn everything before the teacher retires," Daniel said. "Which is accurate." Thomas laughed. "The boy's a quick study. He already knows more than half the contractors I deal with." They spent the next hour going over organizational charts, budget allocations, and scheduling. Claire was all business, but Daniel caught moments when her eyes would meet his, and something unspoken would pass between them. Acknowledgement of the strangeness of this situation, perhaps, or just the shared memory of that night in the rain. "One more thing," Claire said as the meeting wound down. "Thomas, could you give us a moment?" "Sure thing." Thomas hauled himself up with a grunt. "Daniel, I'll be down in mechanical room 3 if you need me. We've got a pump that's been making funny noises." When the door closed behind him, Claire's professional demeanor slipped slightly. She leaned back against her desk, arms crossed, suddenly looking less like a managing director and more like the woman who'd climbed into his truck with a broken heel. "How are you really doing?" she asked. "This has to be overwhelming." "It's a lot," Daniel admitted, "but good lot. I'm grateful for the opportunity, Claire. I need you to know that." "I know, but I also need you to know that I didn't hire you out of charity or guilt. I hired you because you're good at what you do and I trust you. Those two things are surprisingly rare in my world." She paused. "That said, I want to be clear about something. I know there might be talk about why I hired you, about our connection. People gossip. It's inevitable." Daniel felt his stomach tighten. "I hadn't thought about that." "Well, think about it now. There will be employees who assume I gave you this job because of some personal relationship. There will be contractors who try to go around you directly to me. There will be people who test you to see if you actually know what you're doing or if you're just the boss's pet project." Her gaze was direct, unflinching. "Can you handle that?" "I've worked in warehouses for 10 years, Daniel said. "I know about workplace politics and people who underestimate you. I'll handle it." "Good, because I need you to succeed, Daniel. Not just for your sake, but for mine. I'm trying to prove I can run this business without my father, without the old boys network that thinks I'm a little girl playing dress-up in her dead mother's shoes. Having competent people around me, people I can actually trust, that's how I win." Her voice had gone fierce. "So don't fail me." "I won't," Daniel promised, and meant it with everything he had. Something in Claire's expression shifted, the armor coming down just slightly. "I'm sorry, that was intense. There's a lot at stake right now." "I get it, and Claire, I won't let you down." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "I believe you. Now go learn everything Thomas knows before he escapes to Florida and leaves us both stranded." Daniel spent the rest of the day shadowing Thomas through the labyrinth of hotel operations. They responded to a clogged drain on the 7th floor, investigated a guest complaint about a rattling radiator, and spent an hour with the head of housekeeping going over supply protocols. By the time 5 o'clock rolled around, Daniel's head was spinning with information, and his feet hurt from walking miles of corridors. "You'll get used to it," Thomas said as they clocked out. "First week is always brutal, but you've got good instincts, I can tell." Daniel drove to Maya's school feeling both exhausted and exhilarated. When she climbed into the truck, her first question was immediate. "How was it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Tell me everything." "It was good," he said, pulling into traffic. "Overwhelming but good. There's so much to learn." "Did you see Claire?" "Briefly. She's my boss, Maya. I can't just hang out with her." Maya made a face. "But do you think you'll be friends? Like, real friends?" Daniel thought about Claire's fierce declaration in her office, about the vulnerability underneath her professional exterior. "Maybe," he said honestly. "I don't know yet. We'll see." The days fell into a new rhythm. Daniel arrived at the Grandview each morning at 8, spent his days learning from Thomas and managing the small crises that arose in any large building, and left by 5 to pick up Maya from school. The work was challenging in ways the warehouse never had been, more cerebral, requiring constant problem-solving and prioritization. But it was also deeply satisfying. When he fixed something, people noticed. When he improved a system, it made a tangible difference. His team of 4 regarded him with cautious skepticism at first. Jorge, the electrician, was 50-ish and suspicious of any newcomer. Patricia, the plumber, tested him constantly with technical questions. Young Marcus, no relation to Warehouse Marcus, handled general maintenance with the lazy efficiency of someone who'd learned to look busy without actually working. And Diane, the housekeeping liaison, watched him with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "You're the guy Claire picked up in the rain, aren't you?" Diane said one morning, cornering him by the staff coffee maker. She was in her 40s, with a no-nonsense attitude and a tendency to speak her mind. "I heard about it. Everyone heard about it." Daniel's heart sank. "She offered me a ride because her car broke down, that's all." "And then she hired you for a job you're not qualified for." Diane stirred her coffee slowly. "That's what people are saying." "Then people are wrong," Daniel said, meeting her gaze directly. "She hired me because I know how to maintain buildings, and I don't rip people off. What happened before that is irrelevant." Diane studied him, then smiled slightly. "Good answer. I was testing you. I like Claire. She's been good to us since her mother died. I needed to know if you were going to be a problem or an asset." "I'm trying to be an asset." "Try harder. Because Marcus, our Marcus, not yours, has been slacking for 2 years, and if you're as good as Thomas says, you need to deal with that situation sooner rather than later." She was right. By the end of the first week, Daniel had identified Marcus as the weak link, showing up late, taking extended breaks, doing the bare minimum. On Friday afternoon, Daniel called him into the small office he now occupied, right across from Thomas's larger one. "Have a seat, Marcus." The young man slouched into the chair, defensive before Daniel even spoke. "If this is about the second-floor bathroom, I was getting to it." "This is about your work ethic in general," Daniel said. "You're talented. I've seen you repair things in half the time it would take most people, but you're also lazy. You disappear for hours. You leave things half-finished, and that needs to change." Marcus's jaw tightened. "You've been here a week, and you're already coming after me? That's rich." "I'm here because I earned this position. You're here because Thomas was too soft-hearted to fire you." Daniel kept his voice level. "So here's the deal. You have 2 weeks to shape up. Show up on time. Complete your tasks. Act like you care about your job. Do that and we'll be fine. Don't do that, and I'll replace you with someone who actually wants to work. Your choice." "You can't fire me. Claire gave me authority to manage this team as I see fit. She trusts my judgment." Daniel leaned forward. "Look, Marcus, I don't want to fire you. I want you to be great at your job, but I need you to meet me halfway. Can you do that?" Something in Daniel's tone, maybe the fact that he was being direct rather than condescending, maybe the genuine offer of a chance rather than an immediate pink slip, made Marcus pause. "Yeah, okay, I can do that." "Good. Now there's a dripping faucet in room 512. Go fix it and do it right." Some threshold. This was real. He was actually managing people, making decisions that affected livelihoods, holding others accountable. It was terrifying and empowering in equal measure. Thomas poked his head in, grinning. Heard you laying down the law with young Marcus. About time someone did. I hope I didn't overstep. Hell no. That kid needs structure. You provided it. That's exactly what a good manager does. Thomas checked his watch. You got plans tonight? Picking up my daughter, making dinner, helping with homework, the usual. Bring her by sometime. My wife makes cookies that'll change your life. We're empty nesters now. She'd love to fuss over a little girl. Daniel felt a warmth spread through his chest. I'd like that. Thank you, Thomas. As the second week progressed, Daniel found his rhythm. He started to anticipate problems rather than just responding to them. He developed relationships with the key vendors and suppliers. He created a more efficient scheduling system for preventive maintenance. Small improvements, but they added up. And he saw Claire more regularly than he'd expected. She had a habit of doing walk-through inspections, appearing in corridors or mechanical rooms to check on things, and she always stopped to talk when she found him. How's the transition going? She asked one afternoon, finding him in the laundry facility reviewing equipment with Patricia. Good. Patricia's teaching me about industrial washers. Did you know they have completely different maintenance needs than residential machines? Claire smiled. I did not know that. Patricia, is he a good student? He asks smart questions, Patricia admitted, which from her was high praise. Better than the last maintenance manager. After Patricia left, Claire lingered. I heard you had a talk with Marcus. Is that a problem? It's the opposite of a problem. He's been in 3 times already to ask for additional training on various systems. Whatever you said to him, it worked. Daniel shrugged. I just treated him like someone capable of growth instead of someone failing at staying still. Sometimes that's all people need. Claire looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. You're good at this. The management part, not just the technical part. I wasn't sure if you would be, but you are. I raised a 9-year-old alone for 3 years. If I can negotiate bedtimes and vegetable consumption, I can manage a maintenance team. She laughed. That genuine laugh he'd first heard in his truck, the one that made her whole face light up. Fair point. How is Maya adjusting to the new schedule? She loves it. I'm home for dinner every night now. She says I'm less tired than I used to be. Are you? Less tired? Daniel considered the question. Physically, maybe. Mentally, I'm working harder than I ever did at the warehouse, but it's good hard. It's the kind of tired where you accomplish something, you know? I do know, Claire said softly. That's exactly how my mother used to describe running these hotels. Good tired versus bad tired. They stood there in the humid warmth of the laundry facility, massive machines rumbling around them, and Daniel felt the moment stretch into something significant. Claire met his eyes, and he saw the same loneliness he'd glimpsed that night in the rain, the same hunger for connection with someone who understood. Claire, he started, not knowing how to finish. Her phone buzzed insistently, shattering the moment. She glanced at it and her expression hardened. My lawyer, I need to take this. She answered as she walked away. Tell me you have good news, Richard. Daniel watched her go, feeling like he'd been on the edge of saying something important and had been saved by terrible timing. Which was probably for the best. She was his boss. Anything beyond professional friendship was a complication neither of them needed. Thomas retired at the end of Daniel's second week with a small party in the staff break room. There was sheet cake and cheap champagne, and Thomas gave a rambling speech about his 30 years at the Grandview that made half the room tear up. When he shook Daniel's hand for the final time, he pulled him close. Take care of her, he whispered. Claire, I mean. She acts tough, but she's carrying a lot. And she's got nobody looking out for her except lawyers who bill by the hour and employees who depend on her paycheck. She needs friends, real ones. I'll do my best, Daniel promised. With Thomas gone, the full weight of the position settled on Daniel's shoulders. He was alone now, the sole person responsible for keeping 3 multi-million-dollar properties running smoothly. It should have been crushing. Instead, it felt like stepping into a role he'd been preparing for without knowing it. The staff began to trust him. Jorge stopped testing him and started actually listening to his suggestions. Patricia invited him to her daughter's quinceañera. Marcus showed up early 3 days in a row. Diane brought him coffee without being asked and filled him in on the office politics he needed to navigate. And Claire became something harder to define. She was his boss, certainly. She sent him budget spreadsheets and approved his equipment purchases and attended his monthly progress reports. But she was also becoming his friend. She started stopping by his office at the end of long days, sitting in his guest chair with her heels kicked off, talking about the stress of her father's lawsuit or the challenges of managing staff twice her age. "Sometimes I feel like I'm playing dress-up," she admitted one evening, 3 weeks into his tenure. It was past 6, the administrative floor mostly empty. "Like everyone can see that I'm just pretending to know what I'm doing." "That's called imposter syndrome," Daniel said from behind his desk, where he'd been reviewing maintenance logs. "I feel it every day. But then I fix a problem that needed fixing, or I help someone on my team improve, and I realize I actually do know what I'm doing. You feel the same way, but Claire, you graduated from Stanford. You've grown this business 20% in 3 years. You're not playing dress-up, you're doing the actual job. How do you always know the right thing to say?" "I don't. I just say true things and hope they help." She smiled tiredly. "They do help, more than you know." She stood, stretching. "I should go home. I've been here since 6 this morning." "Claire, that's 12 hours. 13 tomorrow if my father's lawyers have their way. They're deposing me about my mother's mental state in her final months. Apparently I need to prove that she was competent to disinherit her worthless husband." The bitterness in her voice was sharp enough to cut. "That's awful. I'm sorry. It's life." She grabbed her jacket from where she'd draped it on his filing cabinet. "At least I have this place. And people like you who actually give a damn about doing good work. That's worth something." After she left, Daniel sat in his small office and thought about loneliness. About how it wasn't really about being alone, but about not having anyone who truly saw you. Claire had employees who depended on her, lawyers who represented her, a father who wanted her money, and a business that needed her leadership. But who did she have who just wanted her company? Who cared about whether she was okay? He thought about texting her, something casual, just checking in. But that felt like crossing a line he wasn't sure he had permission to cross. So instead, he went home to Maya, who'd been at Mrs. Chen's apartment doing homework and eating too many butter cookies. "How was work, Dad?" she asked as they climbed the stairs to their apartment. "Long but good. How was school?" "Fine. Emma says her mom wants to know if we want to come to Thanksgiving with them. They're going to her grandma's house upstate and there's room for us." Daniel's first instinct was to decline, accepting charity, imposing on others' family gatherings, but he caught himself. "That's really nice of them. Let me think about it, okay?" "Okay." Maya paused at their door. "Dad, are you friends with Claire?" "I think so. Why?" "Because you talk about her a lot, and you get this look on your face when you do." "What look?" "The look you used to get with Mom. Happy, but also sad. Like something good that hurts a little." Daniel's chest tightened. His daughter was too observant, too wise for her years. "Claire's my boss and my friend. That's all it can be." "Why?" "Because she's rich and I'm not. Because she lives in a completely different world. Because I work for her and mixing business with personal feelings is a bad idea. Because—" He stopped himself. "Because it's complicated, sweetheart." Maya shrugged. "Grown-ups always say things are complicated. Usually that just means they're scared." She went inside to start on her reading homework, leaving Daniel standing in the hallway, thoroughly called out by a 9-year-old. Was he scared? Maybe. Probably. Claire Whitmore represented everything he'd never let himself want. Success, stability, the kind of life where money wasn't a constant source of anxiety. Getting involved with her, even entertaining the possibility, felt like reaching for something so far out of his league that he'd just end up falling. But that look Maya had mentioned, happy but also sad, good that hurts a little, he couldn't deny it was there. Every time Claire smiled at him, every time she sought him out to talk, every time he caught her watching him with an expression that suggested she might be feeling the same impossible pull he was. November arrived with a cold snap that tested every heating system in all 3 hotels. Daniel spent a frantic week managing emergency repairs, dealing with guest complaints, improving his value by keeping major disasters from becoming catastrophic ones. A boiler failed at the Fitzgerald, and Daniel had a replacement unit installed and running within 8 hours. The Grandview's hot water system developed a leak that could have flooded the basement, and Daniel caught it during a routine inspection. Claire noticed. During their monthly review meeting, she slid an envelope across her desk. "Open it." Inside was a check, a $5,000 bonus. "Claire, I can't." "You can, and you will. You saved me at least $50,000 in emergency costs this month, probably more. You've streamlined operations, improved staff morale, and handled crises like you've been doing this for 20 years instead of 1 month. This isn't charity, Daniel. It's recognizing good work." Daniel stared at the check. $5,000. That was Maya's piano lessons for a year. That was fixing the truck and replacing the couch and maybe even saving something for emergencies. "Thank you," he managed. "This means more than you know." "I think I have some idea." Claire's smile was gentle. "You're doing exactly what I hoped you'd do. Being honest, being competent, and giving a damn. That's rarer than you think." The bonus changed something. It made the job feel more real, more permanent. Daniel allowed himself to believe this wasn't temporary, that he'd actually built something stable for himself and Maya. He opened a savings account, the first he'd had in 3 years, and deposited half the bonus, keeping the other half for immediate needs. That weekend, Maya had a piano recital. Daniel sat in the small auditorium of the music school, watching his daughter play Chopin with fierce concentration, and felt his heart might burst with pride. When she finished, the applause was enthusiastic, and Maya's face lit up with joy. In the lobby afterward, while Maya talked with her teacher, Daniel's phone buzzed. A text from Claire. "How's the recital?" He'd mentioned it in passing days ago. The fact that she'd remembered made something warm bloom in his chest. "She was amazing, playing Chopin like she's been doing it her whole life." The response was immediate. "I'd love to hear her play sometime, if that wouldn't be too weird." Daniel hesitated, thumb hovering over the keyboard. This was personal territory, inviting his boss into his private life, mixing worlds that probably should stay separate. But Maya's voice echoed in his memory. "Grown-ups always say things are complicated. Usually that just means they're scared." "She'd love that," he typed back, "and it wouldn't be weird at all." The invitation came 3 days later, not through text, but in person. Claire appeared in the doorway of Daniel's office on a Tuesday afternoon, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. She wore a cream sweater and dark jeans, casual for her, which usually meant she'd been working from home that morning, and she held her phone like she might need it as a shield. "Is Maya's offer still open?" she asked without preamble. "To hear her play?" Daniel looked up from the preventive maintenance schedule he'd been reviewing. "Of course. When were you thinking?" "I know this sounds impulsive, but would tonight work? I've had the day from hell, lawyers, accountants, my father's legal team trying to subpoena records from when I was 16, and I just need to be around something good for a while." She caught herself. "Sorry, that's a lot to dump on you. If tonight doesn't work—" "Tonight's fine," Daniel interrupted gently. "We're just having spaghetti and meatballs. Nothing fancy. But you're welcome to join us if you don't mind eating in an apartment above a grocery store." Something in Claire's expression softened. "That sounds perfect, actually. What time?" 6:30? I'll text you the address." After she left, Daniel sat in his office having a minor panic attack. Claire Whitmore was coming to his apartment. His small, shabby apartment with the couch that sagged and the kitchen table from a yard sale and the bathroom where the tiles were cracked. He'd need to clean. He'd need to warn Maya. He'd need to figure out how to make spaghetti and meatballs seem like an actual meal instead of the budget dinner it actually was. He texted Maya during her lunch period. "Claire's coming for dinner tonight. Can you help me clean when you get home?" The response was immediate and consisted entirely of exclamation points followed by, "I knew it! It's not like that," he typed back. "She just had a bad day and needs friend time." "Sure, Dad, friend time. I'll help clean." Daniel left work at 4:30, stopped at the grocery store for garlic bread and a salad that wasn't from a bag, and met Maya at home with an hour and a half to transform their apartment from lived in to presentable. They worked together with practiced efficiency, Maya tackling her room and the bathroom while Daniel handled the kitchen and living room, both of them shoving stray items into closets with the universal understanding that sometimes clean just meant not visible. "Should I wear a dress?" Maya asked at 6, standing in her doorway in jeans and a t-shirt with a cartoon cat on it. "Wear whatever makes you comfortable. Claire isn't coming to judge us. She's coming because she wants to." "But she's rich, Dad. Like really rich. What if she thinks we're poor?" Daniel knelt down to Maya's eye level. "We are poor, sweetheart, compared to her anyway. But there's no shame in that. We work hard, we're kind to people, and we have each other. That's worth more than money." Maya nodded slowly. "Okay, but I'm still wearing my nice shirt. The blue one Grandma sent for my birthday." At 6:25, Daniel was stirring sauce and trying not to feel like a teenager before prom. The meatballs were browning nicely. The water was boiling for pasta. The garlic bread was ready to go in the oven. Everything was under control except his nerves, which were decidedly not under control. The knock came at 6:30 exactly. Maya bolted to the door before Daniel could stop her, flinging it open to reveal Claire standing in the hallway, holding a bakery box and looking more nervous than Daniel had ever seen her. "Hi," Maya said. "Come in. We're making spaghetti and Dad's been freaking out all afternoon." "Maya," Daniel warned, but Claire was already laughing. "I've been freaking out too," she admitted, stepping inside. "I brought dessert, cannoli from Vittorio's. I hope that's okay." "That's my favorite bakery," Maya breathed, taking the box reverently. "Dad says we can only go there on special occasions because it's expensive." "Maya, let Claire actually get in the door before you interrogate her about pastries," Daniel said, wiping his hands on a dish towel. The apartment suddenly felt impossibly small with Claire in it, like she brought her own gravity that made everything else contract inward. Claire looked around with genuine interest, taking in the mismatched furniture and the photographs on the walls, mostly of Maya, a few of Daniel and Catherine from before, one of all three of them at the beach that Daniel could barely stand to look at, but couldn't take down. Her gaze lingered on a framed drawing Maya had made of their family, with Catherine as an angel floating above Daniel and Maya holding hands. "Your home is lovely," Claire said softly. "It feels like people actually live here. My condo feels like a hotel room I'm visiting." "That's because you live in hotels," Daniel pointed out, pulling out a chair at their small kitchen table. "Sit. Dinner's almost ready. Maya, set the table, please." They fell into an easy rhythm that surprised Daniel. Claire didn't act like a wealthy CEO slumming in the poor part of town. She asked Maya about school with genuine interest, laughed at her stories about Emma and the class hamster that kept escaping, and helped carry plates to the table without being asked. When Daniel served the spaghetti, aware that it was nothing fancy, just sauce from a jar and meatballs he'd learned to make from a YouTube video, Claire took her first bite and actually closed her eyes. "This is delicious," she said. "When's the last time I had a home-cooked meal? I honestly can't remember." "You don't cook?" Maya asked, twirling pasta on her fork with the concentration of someone who'd been working on their table manners. "I never learned. My mother was always working, and we had staff who handled meals. Then I went to college and ate in dining halls, and then I started running the hotels and just ate at our restaurants or ordered in." Claire smiled ruefully. "I can make coffee and toast. That's about the extent of my culinary skills." "Dad can teach you," Maya offered. "He taught himself everything from videos. He says if you can follow directions, you can cook." "Maya, I'm sure Claire doesn't need cooking lessons from me," Daniel said, embarrassed. "Actually, I'd love that," Claire said, meeting his eyes across the table. "If you were serious about it, I'd pay you, of course." "You're not paying me to teach you how to cook spaghetti," Daniel interrupted. "If you want to learn, I'll teach you. As a friend, not as an employee." The word hung in the air between them. Friend. It felt significant, like they were acknowledging something that had been building since that night in the rain. Claire's expression shifted, something vulnerable and grateful flickering across her face. "As a friend, then," she agreed softly. After dinner, Maya pulled out her keyboard, a used Yamaha Daniel had found on Craigslist for $200, and spent a weekend refurbishing. It wasn't a grand piano, wasn't even close, but Maya loved it with the fierce devotion of someone who understood that sometimes you had to work with what you had. "What do you want to hear?" Maya asked Claire, her fingers already finding the keys. "Whatever you want to play," Claire said, settling on the couch next to Daniel with a proximity that made him hyper-aware of every breath. Something you love. Maya launched into the Chopin nocturne she'd played at the recital, her small hands moving across the keys with confidence that made Daniel's throat tight. She'd worked so hard on this piece, practicing every night after homework, and now she played it for a woman who could probably attend concerts at Carnegie Hall whenever she wanted. But Claire watched Maya with an expression of genuine wonder, and when the final notes faded, she wiped at her eyes quickly. "That was beautiful," she said, her voice thick. "Maya, you're incredibly talented. I want to go to the conservatory," Maya said, turning on the keyboard bench, but it's really expensive, and Dad says we have to see. "Maya," Daniel said warningly. "What? It's true. You said—" "I said we'd figure it out," Daniel interrupted firmly. "Which we will, but that's not something to discuss right now." Claire looked between them, clearly understanding the subtext. "How much is the conservatory program?" $1,500 a semester, Daniel admitted. "It's worth it. They have better teachers, performance opportunities, connections to music schools, but right now it's not in the budget." "What if I sponsored her?" The question came quickly, like Claire had been thinking about it all evening. "I have a charitable foundation, my mother's foundation actually. It provides scholarships for arts education. Maya would be perfect." Daniel felt his spine stiffen. "Claire, I appreciate the offer, but I can't accept charity." "It's not charity, it's a scholarship. Maya would apply like anyone else. She'd just be applying to a foundation that I happen to run. And given her talent and dedication, she'd absolutely qualify." Claire leaned forward, earnest. "Daniel, my mother believed that talent shouldn't be limited by finances. That's why she started the foundation. This is exactly what it's for." "Can I really apply?" Maya asked, bouncing on the bench. "For real?" Daniel looked at his daughter's hopeful face, then at Claire's determined expression, and felt the walls he'd built around accepting help begin to crack. This wasn't Claire trying to buy his friendship or manipulate him. This was her seeing a need and having the means to help, and maybe, just maybe, he needed to let her. "Okay," he said finally. "Maya can apply, but she goes through the normal process. No special treatment." "Absolutely," Claire agreed, though her smile suggested she knew exactly how that application would turn out. "I'll have my assistant send you the information tomorrow." Maya launched herself at Claire in a hug that clearly surprised them both. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." Claire's arms came up slowly to return the embrace, and Daniel saw tears actually spill over onto her cheeks before she blinked them away. "You're welcome, sweetheart. Now play something else for me, something happy." Maya played for another half hour, cycling through everything from classical pieces to a surprisingly good rendition of a pop song she'd learned by ear. Claire and Daniel sat on the couch, not quite touching, but close enough that Daniel could feel the warmth of her presence. And something shifted in the space between them. The boundaries that had kept things professional were dissolving, replaced by something more genuine and more dangerous. When Maya finally wore herself out and retreated to her room to read, Claire helped Daniel clean up the kitchen. They worked in comfortable silence, falling into a rhythm of washing and drying that felt natural, domestic in a way that made Daniel's chest ache with want. "Thank you for tonight," Claire said as she dried the last plate. "I really needed this. Needed to be around people who aren't lawyers or employees or people who want something from me." "You're always welcome here," Daniel said. "For spaghetti, for whatever. You know that, right?" She set down the dish towel and turned to face him fully. They were standing close in the small kitchen, close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her eyes, could smell her perfume mixing with the lingering scent of garlic and tomato sauce. "Daniel, I need to tell you something," she said quietly, "and I need you to just listen, okay? Don't interrupt. Don't try to fix anything. Just listen." His stomach dropped. "Okay. I've been thinking about that night in the rain a lot, about how you stopped when you didn't have to, when most people wouldn't have. And I've been thinking about why I hired you, and I told myself it was because you were competent and honest, which is true, but it's not the whole truth." She took a breath. "The whole truth is that when I was standing on that corner feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life, you saw me. Not Claire Whitmore with her dead mother's business and her worthless father and her Stanford degree, just a person who needed help. And that meant something to me. You meant something to me." "Claire, I'm not finished," she said, holding up a hand. "I know this is complicated. I know you work for me, and that creates problems. I know we're from different worlds, and that probably seems insurmountable, but I also know that I look forward to your company more than anyone else's. That when I'm having a terrible day, I want to talk to you about it. That watching you with Maya tonight made me ache for something I didn't even know I wanted. Her voice cracked slightly. So I guess what I'm saying is that I don't want to just be your boss or even just your friend, but I also don't want to pressure you or make things weird if you don't feel the same way. I just needed to be honest. Daniel stood frozen in his tiny kitchen, the weight of her confession settling over him like snow. Every rational thought screamed at him to be careful, to remember the power imbalance, to protect his job and Maya's future. But his heart, his stupid, hopeful heart that he'd thought had died with Catherine, was pounding with possibility. I feel the same way, he heard himself say. I've been trying not to because you're right, it's complicated. But Claire, when you walk into a room, I notice. When you text me, I smile. When you told me about your father's lawsuit, I wanted to fight him for you. So yeah, I feel the same way. I just didn't think... why would someone like you want someone like me? Someone like you? Claire stepped closer, and now they were definitely in each other's space, definitely crossing lines. You mean someone who's kind and competent and makes his daughter dinner every night and fixes things because he genuinely cares about doing good work? Someone who stopped in the rain for a stranger? Daniel, you have no idea how rare that is in my world. How rare you are. I work for you, he said weakly, even as his hand came up to touch her face almost of its own accord. That's a problem. It is a problem, she agreed, leaning into his touch. But it's not an insurmountable one. People date their colleagues all the time. We just have to be careful, professional at work, and transparent with HR. Your employees will think you're showing me favoritism. Let them think what they want. Anyone who's actually paying attention can see you're good at your job. And Daniel? She covered his hand with hers. I'm so tired of being alone, of being careful, of doing what's expected instead of what feels right. This, you, feel right. He should have taken more time to think, should have considered all the angles, all the ways this could go wrong, should have been more like the careful, cautious man who'd spent 3 years protecting himself and his daughter from any risk that might destabilize their fragile equilibrium. Instead, he kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, like they were both afraid of breaking something precious. But then Claire's arms came around his neck, and Daniel's hands found her waist, and the kiss deepened into something that felt like coming home after a long journey. She tasted like wine from dinner and something sweet, and when they finally broke apart, both breathless, Daniel rested his forehead against hers. We're really doing this? He asked. I want to, she whispered. If you do. I do. I really do. But Claire, I need you to understand something. I come as a package deal. Maya's my priority. Always. If this affects her negatively in any way, then we stop, Claire finished. I wouldn't want to continue if it hurt her either. Daniel, I'm not trying to replace her mother or insert myself where I don't belong. I just want a chance to see where this goes. Slowly, carefully, with her well-being as the priority. He kissed her again, softer this time, a promise rather than a question. When they separated, Claire was smiling in a way he'd never seen before, unguarded, genuinely happy, the loneliness that usually lived in her eyes temporarily banished. I should go, she said reluctantly, before Maya comes out and finds us making out in your kitchen like teenagers. That would be a conversation, Daniel agreed, but he didn't let go of her hand. They walked to the door together, fingers intertwined, and at the threshold Claire turned back. Thank you for dinner, for letting me be part of your evening, for the best night I've had in longer than I can remember. Come back anytime. We have spaghetti every Tuesday. Then I'll see you next Tuesday, and tomorrow at work where we'll be completely professional and appropriate. Completely, Daniel agreed, knowing they were both terrible liars. After Claire left, Daniel stood in his living room feeling like the world had tilted on its axis. He'd kissed Claire Whitmore, was possibly dating Claire Whitmore, had agreed to navigate the complicated intersection of personal and professional with a woman who was so far out of his league that they weren't even playing the same sport. She left her scarf. Maya's voice came from her doorway, making Daniel jump. You should probably return it tomorrow. How long have you been listening? Long enough? Maya came out fully, holding the scarf Claire had draped over the couch. You kissed her, didn't you? There was no point in lying. Yeah, we did. Is that okay with you? Maya considered the question seriously. Mom would have liked her. She always said you needed someone who saw how special you are, not just someone who needed fixing. Claire sees you. She held out the scarf. So yeah, it's okay, but Dad? Yeah, baby? Don't mess it up. Daniel laughed despite himself. I'll do my best. That night, lying in bed, Daniel's phone buzzed. A text from Claire. Thank you for tonight, for everything. Sleep well. You too, he typed back. Sweet dreams. Her response came immediately. They will be. They're about spaghetti and piano music and a man who stopped in the rain. Daniel fell asleep smiling for the first time in longer than he could remember. And when morning came, the city felt different, brighter, full of possibility. But reality has a way of asserting itself, and Daniel's new reality included workplace politics, curious employees, and the delicate balance of maintaining professionalism while nursing feelings that made him want to seek out Claire's company every spare moment. He arrived at work Wednesday morning determined to act normal, professional, completely unaffected by the fact that he'd kissed his boss less than 12 hours ago. That determination lasted approximately until he saw her. Claire was standing by the front desk talking to the manager, and when she caught sight of Daniel crossing the lobby, her whole face lit up before she caught herself and schooled it back to professional neutrality. But that brief moment of unguarded joy hit Daniel like a physical force. She excused herself from the conversation and walked over, and Daniel was suddenly very aware that they were in a public space with employees everywhere. Good morning, she said formally. Do you have those maintenance reports ready for review? I'll have them on your desk by noon, he replied, matching her tone. Excellent. A pause. Also, I left my scarf at your place last night. I know. I'll bring it in. They stood there, awkward and obvious, until Diane walked past and said cheerfully, You two look like you're negotiating a hostage situation. Relax. After she was out of earshot, Claire let out a breath. This is harder than I thought it would be, acting normal when all I want to do is... She cut herself off, glancing around. I know, Daniel said quietly. But we agreed. Professional at work. Right. Professional. Claire stepped back, creating proper distance. I should go. Meeting with the accountants in 10 minutes. But Daniel? For what it's worth, I'm really glad we're doing this. Even if it means I have to pretend I'm not thinking about kissing you again while discussing quarterly budgets. She walked away before he could respond, leaving Daniel standing in the lobby trying to remember what he'd been planning to do before his entire brain had short-circuited. The day passed in a blur of routine tasks made extraordinary by the knowledge that Claire was somewhere in the building, thinking about him the way he was thinking about her. They crossed paths twice more, once in a hallway where they both said awkward hellos and kept walking, once in the parking lot at the end of the day, where they stood by their respective vehicles and talked about neutral topics while everything unsaid hung in the air between them. This is ridiculous, Claire finally said. We're both adults. We should be able to have a conversation without acting like we're doing something wrong. We're not doing something wrong, Daniel said. We're just doing something new. Give it time. Time, Claire repeated. Right. How much time until I can stop wanting to drag you into a supply closet? Daniel laughed despite himself. Probably more than one day. But Claire, we have Tuesday. That's something. Tuesday, she said, and her smile was worth every moment of awkwardness. I'll count the hours. The rest of the week tested their resolve. Every accidental touch felt electric. Every professional conversation had subtext that made Daniel hyper-aware of Claire's presence. By Friday, the staff had definitely noticed something was different. Diane cornered Daniel in the break room with a knowing look. So you and Claire, she said without preamble. That's happening, right? I don't know what you mean, Daniel said unconvincingly. Please. The entire hotel knows something shifted this week. You two look at each other like teenagers who just discovered attraction. She poured herself coffee. For what it's worth, I approve. Claire needs someone good in her life, and you're about as good as they come. Just don't let it affect your work. It won't, Daniel promised. That's why we're being careful. Good. Because if you hurt her, you'll have me to answer to. And before that, you'll have Patricia, Jorge, and half the housekeeping staff. We're protective of our boss. The warning was clear, but it came from a place of love that made Daniel respect the team even more. Claire had earned their loyalty, and they weren't going to let anyone, even Daniel, take advantage of it. Saturday, Daniel spent the morning with Maya at the public library, then took her to the park where she played with Emma while he sat on a bench and tried not to constantly check his phone for messages from Claire. They'd been texting throughout the week, nothing inappropriate, just funny observations about their days, questions about meals and music, and the mundane details that meant someone cared. His phone buzzed. "What are you doing tomorrow?" "Nothing planned. Why?" "I want to take you and Maya somewhere, if you're free." Daniel hesitated. Public outings meant being seen together, meant taking their relationship beyond Tuesday dinners and stolen moments at work. It felt significant, like crossing another threshold. "Where?" he typed back. "It's a surprise. Just dress casual and be ready by 10. He should have asked more questions, should have been more cautious, but instead he found himself typing, "Okay, we'll be ready." Sunday morning arrived cold and bright, November asserting itself with frost on the windows and breath visible in the air. Daniel and Maya were waiting outside their apartment at 10 sharp when a car pulled up, not Claire's usual sleek sedan, but an SUV, and Claire was driving herself instead of using a driver. "Climb in," she called through the window. "We have an hour's drive." "Where are we going?" Maya asked as she buckled herself into the back seat. "You'll see," Claire said mysteriously, "but I thought maybe we could all use a day away from the city." They drove north through increasingly rural landscape, autumn colors still clinging to the trees despite the lateness of the season. Claire had music playing, something classical that Maya identified as Debussy, and they talked easily about nothing important. It felt natural, comfortable, like they'd been doing this for years instead of days. An hour later, Claire pulled into a gravel lot beside a small lake surrounded by woods. A few other cars were parked nearby, and Daniel could see people walking trails in the distance. "My mother used to bring me here when I was young," Claire said as they got out. "Before the business got big, before everything got complicated. We'd pack sandwiches and spend the whole day hiking and talking." She pulled a picnic basket from the trunk. "I haven't been back since she died, but I wanted to share it with you." The vulnerability in her voice made Daniel's chest ache. "Thank you for bringing us." They hiked an easy trail around the lake, Maya running ahead to examine interesting rocks and trees, while Daniel and Claire walked together, close enough that their hands occasionally brushed. Claire talked about her mother, about Victoria's fierce determination, her kindness, her ability to make anyone feel valued. "She would have liked you," Claire said softly. She always said the measure of a person was in their small actions, not their grand gestures. How they treated waiters and janitors and people who couldn't do anything for them. "You stop for people in the rain. She would have loved that about you." "I wish I could have met her." "Me too." Claire was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes I talk to her, tell her about the business, about decisions I have to make. I know it's probably silly." "It's not silly," Daniel interrupted. "I talk to Catherine sometimes too, especially when I'm struggling with something about Maya. The dead don't really leave us, they just change form." They found a bench overlooking the lake and unpacked the picnic, sandwiches from an actual deli, fruit, cookies, juice boxes for Maya. It was simple but perfect, eaten in companionable silence while the water lapped at the shore and the autumn sun warmed their faces. After lunch, Maya challenged them to skip stones, and they spent a ridiculous amount of time trying to best each other's records while Maya kept score with elaborate rules she made up as she went. Claire's laugh echoed across the water, and Daniel realized he'd never seen her this relaxed, this genuinely happy. "This is nice," Maya announced as they packed up to leave in the late afternoon. "We should do this more. Like a family." The word hung in the air, family. It was too soon for that, too fast. Too many complications still unresolved. But watching Claire's face as Maya said it, seeing the hope and longing there, Daniel thought maybe it wasn't impossible. Maybe they could build something between the three of them that honored the past while creating a new future. On the drive back, Maya fell asleep in the back seat, and Daniel and Claire talked quietly in the front. "Thank you for today," Daniel said. for sharing that place with us. Thank you for coming, for letting me be part of your lives. Claire glanced at him. I know it's only been a week. I know we're moving fast. But Daniel, I haven't felt this happy in years. Not since before my mother got sick. You make me feel like I'm allowed to be something other than the business. You are allowed, he said firmly. You're allowed to be happy, Claire, to have a life outside work, to let people care about you. Are you? She asked softly. Caring about me? Yeah, he admitted. I really am. They pulled up outside Daniel's apartment as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Maya stirred in the back seat, blinking awake with confusion before remembering where they were. Can Claire come up? She asked sleepily. We could watch a movie. I should get going, Claire said reluctantly. Early meeting tomorrow. Tuesday then, Daniel said. Spaghetti and whatever else the evening brings? Tuesday, Claire agreed. I'll be there. But as they climbed out of the car, Daniel's phone rang. Marcus, not the maintenance Marcus, but the warehouse Marcus, calling from a number Daniel had almost deleted a dozen times. Hayes, sorry to bother you on a Sunday, Marcus said when Daniel answered. But I thought you should know there was an accident at Belmont last night. Jimmy Rodriguez fell from a ladder. He's in the hospital. Daniel's stomach dropped. Jimmy had been part of his crew, a good guy with 3 kids. Is he okay? Broke his back. They're saying he'll recover, but it's going to be months of rehab. Thing is, his family's already struggling, and now he can't work. Some of the guys are organizing to help, and I thought maybe you'd want to contribute. Of course. Text me the details. Daniel hung up, feeling shaken. That could have been him. If he'd still been at the warehouse, if he'd been the one on that ladder, Maya would have been left alone. What's wrong? Claire asked, seeing his face. He told her about Jimmy, about the accident, about the precariousness of warehouse work, and how quickly life could change. I keep thinking if I'd still been there, that could have been me. Claire reached for his hand. But you weren't there. You're here. You're safe. She paused. How much do they need for his family? I don't know yet. Marcus is coordinating. Find out. I'll match whatever the warehouse collects and we'll do it anonymously. Jimmy doesn't need to know where it came from. Claire, that's incredibly generous. It's what my mother would have done. What she taught me to do with privilege. Use it to help when you can. She squeezed his hand. Besides, if that accident had happened when you were still there, Maya would have been the one needing help. So this is just paying forward something I'm grateful didn't happen. That was Tuesday's conversation. Daniel learned the warehouse had collected $3,000 for Jimmy's family, and Claire anonymously donated another $3,000 through her foundation. Jimmy's wife cried when Marcus told her, and Daniel felt a gratitude so profound it made his chest hurt. Over the next 2 weeks, a pattern emerged. Weekdays were professional. Daniel managing his team, Claire running her business, both of them carefully maintaining appropriate boundaries at work, even as the tension between them hummed like a live wire. And Tuesdays were theirs. Dinner at Daniel's apartment, Maya playing piano, the 3 of them settling into a comfortable rhythm that felt increasingly like what Maya had called it, family. Claire started teaching Daniel about the business side of hotel management, sharing insights that went beyond his maintenance role. He started teaching her to cook, beginning with simple recipes that built her confidence. Maya thrived with the attention from both adults, her personality blossoming as she realized she was allowed to care about Claire without betraying her mother's memory. Is it okay that I like her? Maya asked Daniel one night after Claire had left. I still love Mom, but I like Claire too. Of course it's okay, Daniel assured her. Love isn't finite, sweetheart. You can love Mom and still care about other people. Mom would want you to be happy, and if Claire makes you happy, then that's a good thing. Does she make you happy? Yeah, baby, she really does. But happiness in adult life rarely comes without complication, and Daniel should have known their peaceful bubble couldn't last forever. The first crack appeared on a Wednesday in late November, when Daniel was reviewing maintenance contracts in his office and overheard 2 housekeeping staff talking in the hallway. I'm just saying it's suspicious timing. He shows up out of nowhere and suddenly he's head of maintenance and dating the boss? Maybe he's just good at his job. Or maybe he's good at something else. How else does someone with his background end up in this position? The implication was clear and ugly. Daniel sat frozen at his desk, feeling his face burn with humiliation and anger. He'd known this would happen. Claire had warned him, but knowing didn't make it hurt less. He mentioned it to Claire that evening, catching her as she was leaving for the day. "People are talking," he said bluntly. "About us. About why you hired me." Claire's jaw tightened. "Who?" "Does it matter? Claire, they think I slept my way into this job. That I'm using you." "That's ridiculous. Anyone who's actually paying attention can see you're excellent at your job." "But that's just it. They're not paying attention to my job. They're paying attention to our relationship." Daniel ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "Maybe we need to be more careful. Maybe we shouldn't—" "Don't," Claire interrupted fiercely. "Don't let gossip dictate your life. People will always talk, Daniel. If it's not about this, it'll be something else. You can't control what they think." "But I can control whether I give them ammunition," he countered. "Claire, I need this job. Not just for the money, but because it's the first time in years I felt like I'm building something. And if people think I only have it because of our relationship, then they're wrong, and you prove them wrong by continuing to be exceptional at what you do." She stepped closer. "Daniel, I knew this would be complicated. We both did. But I'm not willing to give up what we're building because some people can't understand that two things can be true at once. You can be good at your job and also be someone I care about." He wanted to believe her, wanted to trust that competence would speak louder than gossip. But he'd lived too much of his life on the wrong side of judgment to be that naive. "I just don't want to be a liability," he said quietly, "for you or for Maya." "You're not a liability, you're—" Claire's phone buzzed insistently. She glanced at it and her expression hardened. "My father's lawyer. Again. I have to take this." She walked away, already bringing the phone to her ear, and Daniel was left standing in the hallway, feeling like the ground beneath their fragile relationship was less solid than he'd hoped. The lawsuit escalated the week before Thanksgiving, dropping into their lives like a bomb with legal paperwork for shrapnel. Claire's father filed an injunction claiming she was mismanaging the business, using her relationship with an unqualified employee as evidence of poor judgment. Daniel only learned about it when Claire showed up at his apartment on a Thursday night, not Tuesday, looking shattered in a way that made his heart crack. "He's using you," she said without preamble, standing in his doorway with tears streaming down her face. "My father's lawyers are claiming that hiring you proves I make emotional decisions over business ones, that I'm letting personal relationships compromise the company. They're calling you an unqualified maintenance worker who manipulated his way into a position he doesn't deserve." Daniel felt like he'd been punched. "Claire, it gets worse. They're subpoenaing employment records, trying to prove I gave you preferential treatment. They want to depose you about our relationship, about how we met, about everything." She wiped at her face angrily. "I'm so sorry, Daniel. I never meant to drag you into this." Maya appeared behind Daniel, her face worried. "Why is Claire crying?" "Go to your room, sweetheart," Daniel said gently. "Claire and I need to talk." "But now, please." After Maya reluctantly disappeared, Daniel pulled Claire inside and closed the door. She collapsed onto his couch, and he sat beside her, not touching but close enough that she could feel his presence. "Tell me everything," he said. The story came out in fragments. Her father's legal team had been building their case for months, documenting every decision Claire made, looking for evidence that she was incompetent to run the business. Daniel's hiring had been a gift to them, a clear example, they claimed, of Claire prioritizing personal feelings over business sense. They were arguing that Victoria's will should be overturned because Claire was proving she couldn't handle the responsibility. "The worst part," Claire said bitterly, "is that they're not completely wrong. I did hire you partly because of personal feelings. Not only because of them. You are qualified, you have saved us money, you've improved operations. But I can't pretend that stopping for me in the rain didn't factor into my decision. And now that's being used to destroy everything my mother built." Daniel's mind raced through implications. "What do you need me to do?" "I'll testify. I'll provide documentation of every improvement I've made, every dollar I've saved. You'll quit," Claire interrupted quietly. The words hung between them like a guillotine blade. "What?" "It's the only way. If you're not working for me, they lose that piece of evidence. It won't solve everything, but it removes their best example of my alleged poor judgment." Her voice was hollow. My lawyers think it's the smart move. Separate our professional relationship from our personal one. So I lose my job because your father's a bastard? Daniel felt anger rising, hot and sharp. Claire, that's not fair. To me, to Maya, I know it's not fair. She turned to face him fully, her eyes red and anguished. None of this is fair. But Daniel, if I lose this lawsuit, I lose the hotels. All of them. My mother's legacy. Gone to my father, who will probably sell them within a year. Hundreds of employees out of work. Everything she sacrificed for. Destroyed. So yes, I'm asking you to quit. And I know it's not fair and I hate myself for it. But I don't know what else to do. Daniel stood up, pacing the small living room. His mind cataloged everything that would change. The job he loved, the financial stability he'd just started to trust, the future he'd been building for Maya. The conservatory scholarship would probably go away. The health insurance. The sense that maybe, finally, things were looking up. How much time do I have? He asked. My lawyers want it done by Monday, before depositions start. 4 days. He had 4 days before his life imploded again. And us? The question came out rougher than he intended. What happens to us? Claire's face crumpled. I don't know. How can we date when my father's lawyers are watching everything I do? When being with you is being used as evidence against me? Daniel, I care about you so much, but I can't lose my mother's business. I can't let her down like that. So you're choosing the hotels over me? It wasn't an accusation, just a statement of fact that tasted like ash. I'm choosing responsibility over what I want, Claire corrected, but her voice broke on the words. I'm choosing to be the person my mother raised me to be instead of the person who gets to be happy. And I know that's not enough. And I know you deserve better, but it's all I can give you right now. Daniel thought about Catherine, about the night she'd died driving to that job interview she'd been nervous about. She'd told him that morning, sometimes you have to risk everything for the chance at something better. And he'd kissed her and told her to be careful, and never imagined those would be their last words. But this wasn't the same. This was Claire asking him to sacrifice for her fight, not for their shared future. This was being collateral damage in someone else's war. I need to think, he said finally, about what this means for me and Maya, about whether I can just walk away from everything I've built there. I understand. Claire stood, gathering her coat with shaking hands. I should go. I shouldn't have come here like this. I needed you to hear it from me, not from HR. Claire, wait. Daniel caught her hand. Whatever happens with the job, with the lawsuit, with all of it, I don't regret any of this. Meeting you, stopping that night, taking a chance on something that felt impossible. None of it. She pulled him into a fierce hug, burying her face in his shoulder. I don't regret it either. Even if it all falls apart, I'll never regret knowing you. Knowing both of you. After she left, Daniel stood in his living room feeling like the world had tilted again, but this time not in a good direction. Maya emerged from her room, her face pinched with worry. Are you going to lose your job? She asked. Maybe, sweetheart. Probably. Because of Claire's mean dad? Because life is complicated and sometimes there aren't good choices, just less bad ones. He sat on the couch and Maya climbed up beside him. But we'll be okay. We always figure it out, right? Will you and Claire stop being together? That question hurt more than the job loss. I don't know, baby. It's complicated. Maya was quiet for a long moment. Mom used to say that love means fighting for people even when it's hard. Is Claire worth fighting for? Yes, Daniel said without hesitation. She absolutely is. Then fight, Maya said simply. Don't just let her dad win. Out of the mouths of babes, Daniel thought. His 9-year-old daughter had more clarity than he did. That night, he couldn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about fairness and sacrifice and what it meant to love someone. Claire was asking him to give up his job, possibly their relationship, to save her mother's legacy. And part of him understood family legacy, responsibility, hundreds of employees depending on her. Those were real stakes, but so was his life. So was Maya's future. So was the dignity he'd felt walking into the Grandview every morning, knowing he was good at his job, that he'd earned his position through competence and hard work, not just because he'd stopped for someone in the rain. By Friday morning, he'd made a decision. He called Claire before heading to work. "I'm not quitting," he said when she answered. "Daniel, let me finish. I'm not quitting because quitting validates their argument. It makes it look like I never deserved the job, like you made a mistake hiring me. And Claire, I'm really good at what I do. The numbers prove it. Maintenance costs are down 30% since I started. Guest satisfaction scores related to facilities are up. I've built a team that actually functions efficiently. Those are facts, not feelings. But the lawsuit, let them depose me. Let them question my qualifications. I'll show them every certification I have, every dollar I've saved, every improvement I've made. I'll bring in Jorge and Patricia and Diane to testify that I know what I'm doing. I'll make them prove I'm unqualified instead of just asserting it." He took a breath. "Your father's lawyers are counting on us rolling over, on you being too scared of looking bad to fight back. But Claire, your mother didn't build an empire by backing down from fights. She built it by being tough and smart and refusing to let anyone tell her she didn't belong in the room." Silence on the other end. Then quietly, "My lawyers will hate this." "Probably. But your mother would love it." He heard her breath catch. "You're sure about this? Because once we fight back, it's going to get ugly." "I'm sure. And Claire, we fight together, not with you sacrificing me to protect yourself. That's not a relationship. That's not what your mother would want for you." "Okay," she said, and he could hear the tears in her voice. "Okay? We fight together?" The next week was brutal. Daniel gave his deposition, 3 hours of hostile questions from lawyers who treated him like he was a con artist who'd manipulated his way into Claire's life. But he came prepared with documentation, with testimonials from his team, with detailed reports showing exactly how he'd improved operations. He remained calm, professional, and unshakable, even when they tried to rattle him by bringing up Catherine's death or implying he was using Maya to gain Claire's sympathy. "My wife died 3 years ago," he said evenly when they pushed that angle. "I loved her deeply, and losing her was the worst thing that ever happened to me. But grief doesn't make me less qualified to maintain buildings, and meeting Claire Whitmore, however it happened, doesn't change the fact that I'm good at my job." Claire's deposition was equally rough. They grilled her about the night they met, about the timeline of their relationship, about whether she'd compromised the business by hiring someone she had personal feelings for. But she held her ground, presenting her own documentation showing that Daniel's hiring had been financially sound, that his performance exceeded expectations, that the relationship had developed after his employment, not before. "My mother taught me to judge people by their character and their work, not their credentials or their connections," she said at one point, her voice steady despite the tears Daniel knew she'd cried in preparation. Daniel Hayes stopped for a stranger in the rain when he had every reason to keep driving. That told me something about his character. His work since then has told me something about his competence. And yes, I developed feelings for him. But those feelings don't negate his qualifications any more than my father's feelings about me negate mine. Thanksgiving came in the middle of the legal storm. Daniel had accepted Emma's mother's invitation for Maya's sake, but the day felt hollow. He sat at a table full of people he barely knew, pushing turkey around his plate and thinking about Claire, who texted that morning. "Having Thanksgiving with lawyers, living the dream, miss you both." "Dad, you're not eating," Maya whispered. "Sorry, sweetheart, just thinking." Emma's mother, Susan, leaned over. "Everything okay, Daniel? You seem distracted." He didn't mean to, but the story came spilling out. Not all of it, but enough. The job, the lawsuit, the impossible position Claire was in. Susan listened with the patient attention of someone who'd weathered her own storms. "Can I give you some unsolicited advice?" she said when he finished. "Please." "My ex-husband left me when Emma was 2. Cleaned out our bank account, moved across the country, and I spent 3 years fighting him in court for child support he never paid anyway. And I remember thinking I had 2 choices. I could be bitter about the unfairness of it all, or I could build something good anyway, despite him." She smiled gently. "Sounds like Claire's father is trying to take something that doesn't belong to him. And you both have a choice. Let him win by making yourself smaller, or fight for what you've built and refuse to be diminished. It's not fair that you have to fight. But life rarely is." "I'm trying to fight," Daniel said. "I'm just not sure we're going to win." "Maybe not. But at least you'll know you tried. That's worth something. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation. Claire's lawyers, now taking a more aggressive strategy, compiled evidence of the business's success under her leadership, gathered testimonials from employees and business partners, and built a case that Claire was not only competent, but exceptional. Daniel's role became a small piece of a much larger argument, that Claire made smart, strategic decisions that benefited the business, and hiring him was just one example. On Monday, they reconvened for more depositions. But this time, Claire's legal team went on the offense, questioning Richard Whitmore's own business acumen, his lack of involvement in the company during Victoria's lifetime, his sudden interest only after her death when money was on the line. They deposed employees who testified about Richard's rare visits to the hotels, his dismissive attitude toward staff, his complete lack of understanding of day-to-day operations. Diane, in particular, was devastating. Mr. Whitmore visited maybe twice a year when Mrs. Whitmore was alive, she said coolly when questioned. And both times, he treated housekeeping staff like we were invisible, called us the help, didn't know any of our names. Meanwhile, Claire knows every employee's name, asks about our families, fights for our benefits. So if we're talking about who should run these hotels, I'd choose Claire every single time. The tide began to shift. What had started as Richard's case against Claire became Claire's case against Richard. A referendum not just on her competence, but on his character, his motives, his fitness to inherit something he'd never contributed to. By early December, Richard's lawyers were hinting at settlement negotiations. They could see which way the wind was blowing, could see that dragging this out would only make Richard look worse. Claire's lawyer called her on a Friday afternoon with the news. They're offering to drop the lawsuit in exchange for a lump sum payment, essentially buying out his theoretical inheritance claim, the lawyer explained during a conference call Daniel was invited to join. $2 million, and he goes away forever. No further claim to the business, no involvement in operations. $2 million. Claire sounded incredulous. For a man who contributed nothing and tried to destroy everything? It's cheaper than continuing to fight, and it gives you certainty. No risk of a judge who might see things his way, no years of appeals. You pay him off, he disappears, and you move on with your life. Claire was quiet for so long Daniel thought the call had dropped. Then, "What do you think, Daniel?" "Me? Why does my opinion matter?" "Because you're part of this. Because he used our relationship as ammunition. Because I trust your judgment." Her voice was firm. "So what do you think?" Daniel thought about dignity and principles, about fighting battles versus winning wars. "I think your mother would tell you to protect the business first and your pride second. 2 million hurts, but you'll make it back, and you'll do it without him hanging over your head for the next decade." "Agreed," Claire said. "Tell them we'll settle, but I want ironclad language. He has no claim, no involvement, no right to even speak about the business publicly. I want him gone completely." The settlement was finalized a week before Christmas. Richard got his money and his name in the tabloids for a few days as a footnote to his daughter's success. Claire got her freedom, her business, and the knowledge that she'd fought and won. The night the papers were signed, Claire showed up at Daniel's apartment without calling first. She looked exhausted and relieved and younger somehow, like a weight had lifted that she'd been carrying so long she'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. "It's over," she said simply. "It's over," he agreed, and pulled her into a hug that lasted until Maya got home from Emma's house and found them still standing in the doorway. "Are you guys okay?" Maya asked, looking between them. "We're better than okay," Claire said, wiping her eyes. "We won." They celebrated with cheap champagne for the adults and sparkling cider for Maya, with Chinese takeout because none of them felt like cooking, with the kind of giddy relief that comes after surviving something you weren't sure you would. And later, after Maya had gone to bed, Claire and Daniel sat on his sagging couch and talked about what came next. "I don't want to hide anymore," Claire said. "The lawsuit made us cautious, made us act like what we have is something to be ashamed of. But Daniel, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of us. And I'm tired of pretending otherwise." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying let's tell people. Let's be public about this relationship. Let's stop caring what gossips think and just be happy." She took his hand. "You were right when you said we fight together. I want to keep doing that, fighting together, building together, being together without hiding it. People will still talk. Let them. I'm done letting other people's opinions dictate my life. My father spent my whole childhood caring more about what society thought than about what made us happy. I won't make that mistake. She turned to face him fully. Daniel Hayes, I'm falling in love with you, and I don't want to hide that anymore. His breath caught. Love. She'd said it first, taken that leap before he had the courage to. I'm falling in love with you too, he said, and watched her face transform with joy. Have been since the night in the rain, probably. Definitely since that first dinner when you laughed at Maya's jokes and looked at us like we were something precious. She kissed him then, deep and sure and full of promise. And when they broke apart, both smiling, Daniel thought about how far they'd come from that October night. From a woman stranded in the rain and a man who stopped to help, to this moment of choosing each other deliberately, publicly, with full knowledge of the complications and full commitment to facing them together. The next day at work, they made it official. Claire sent an email to all staff announcing her relationship with Daniel, emphasizing that it had been disclosed to HR, that there were protocols in place to prevent conflicts of interest, and that any concerns should be directed to the appropriate channels rather than workplace gossip. It was professional and clear, and left no room for speculation. The response was mixed. Some employees were supportive. Diane sent Daniel a text that just said, "Finally," with a string of heart emojis. Jorge clapped him on the shoulder and said, "Good for you, boss." Patricia nodded approval. But others were skeptical, still convinced there was favoritism or impropriety no matter what the official line said. "You can't control what they think," Claire reminded him when Daniel expressed frustration. "You can only control what you do. Keep being excellent at your job. Let the results speak for themselves." Christmas approached with the kind of anticipation Daniel hadn't felt in years. He and Maya decorated their apartment with cheap tinsel and dollar store ornaments, and Maya made a construction paper chain to count down the days. Claire was there most evenings, slowly becoming a fixture in their lives in a way that felt natural and right. She'd learned to make spaghetti without burning the sauce, could navigate their tiny kitchen without asking where things were, and had a standing invitation to Friday movie nights. On Christmas Eve, Claire invited them to her condo for the first time. Daniel had been curious about where she lived. He'd imagined something cold and modern, all glass and steel and expensive art. Instead, her home was warm and lived in, full of photographs of her mother and books stacked on every surface and a kitchen that looked barely used despite being state-of-the-art. "Welcome to my cave," she said, taking their coats. "Fair warning, I'm terrible at decorating. My Christmas tree is probably pathetic compared to what you're used to." But her tree was beautiful in its imperfection, decorated with ornaments that clearly meant something, each with a story. "This one's from my first Christmas with my mother running the hotels," Claire said, showing Maya a small glass building. "And this one's from when I graduated Stanford. And this one," she held up a simple wooden star. "This one was my mother's, from when she was a child. It's the only decoration I have from her childhood." Maya touched it gently. "It's beautiful." They exchanged gifts that evening. Daniel had agonized over what to get Claire. What do you give someone who can buy anything she wants? And finally settled on a framed photograph he'd taken at the lake, the place Claire had shared with them. It captured the bench where they'd eaten lunch, the water reflecting autumn colors, the peace of that perfect day. Claire's eyes filled with tears when she unwrapped it. "This is perfect. Thank you." Her gift to him was equally thoughtful, a vintage leather tool bag with his initials embossed on it, filled with high-quality tools he'd never have splurged on for himself. "For the handyman who taught me that fixing things is its own kind of art," the card read. And for Maya, Claire had arranged something that made the little girl actually scream with joy, a full scholarship to the conservatory, awarded through the foundation, along with a letter from the music director praising her audition and welcoming her to the program starting in January. "You really got in on your own merit," Claire insisted as Maya bounced around the room. "I just made sure the process happened quickly. The director said you were one of the most talented applicants they'd seen this year." Maya threw her arms around Claire with such force they both nearly fell over. "Thank you, thank you, thank you. This is the best present ever." Later, after Maya had finally worn herself out and fallen asleep on Claire's couch, Daniel and Claire stood in her kitchen drinking wine and marveling at how much had changed in 3 months. "I keep thinking about that night," Claire said softly. "Standing in the rain, feeling like my life was falling apart. If you'd driven past, if you'd been the one person who didn't stop, where would we be now?" "Apart," Daniel said simply, "living parallel lives that never intersected. Me still at the warehouse, you still fighting everything alone. I don't want to think about that version of the world. This one's so much better." She set down her wine glass and moved into his arms. "Daniel, I know it's only been 3 months. I know some people would say that's too fast, but when I think about my future now, you're in it, you and Maya both. And I wanted to tell you that, wanted you to know that this isn't just a nice thing that happened to me. This is the thing that changed everything." "It changed everything for me too," he said, holding her close. "You gave me more than a job, Claire. You gave me back hope, the belief that good things could happen, that life could be more than just surviving day to day." They stood there in her kitchen while Maya slept in the other room, and Daniel thought about stopping in the rain, about split-second decisions that alter the entire trajectory of a life. He thought about Catherine, who would have loved Claire's fierce determination and kind heart. He thought about Maya, who was getting opportunities he'd once thought impossible. He thought about himself, about the man who'd been drowning in grief and responsibility, now standing in a beautiful condo with a woman he loved, talking about their future. The universe had tested him that October night, had put a stranger in his path when he was tired and rushed, and had every reason to keep driving. And he'd stopped. He'd chosen kindness over convenience, connection over caution. And the universe, in its strange way, had rewarded him. Not with money, though the job helped. Not with ease, the lawsuit had proven that. But with something rarer and more precious. With love. With purpose. With the sense that his life mattered beyond just getting through it. Christmas Day was spent at Daniel's apartment, the three of them cooking together. Daniel directing, Claire learning, Maya stealing bites and offering commentary. They ate too much, opened presents, and watched Maya play her new pieces on the keyboard with the joy of someone who'd been given permission to dream. In the evening, after Maya had gone to bed, Claire and Daniel sat on the couch while snow began to fall outside, the kind of picture-perfect Christmas snow that rarely happens, but did this year, this night. "I love you," Claire said, not for the first time, but with a gravity that suggested she needed him to really hear it. "Not because you stopped in the rain, or because you're good at your job, or because you make me laugh. I love you because you're kind when you don't have to be, because you believe in fixing things instead of replacing them, because you're raising an incredible daughter who knows that love means fighting for people even when it's hard. I love you because you make me want to be better, braver, more honest, and I wanted you to know that." Daniel pulled her closer, pressed a kiss to her hair. "I love you too. For seeing me as more than just someone struggling to keep his head above water. For trusting me with your business and your grief and your mother's legacy. For letting Maya and me into your life when you could have just driven past us in your own way. You chose to stop too, Claire, and I'm grateful every day that you did." Outside, the city sparkled with Christmas lights and fresh snow. Inside, warmth and love and the promise of more good days ahead. It wasn't perfect. Life never is. There would still be challenges, still be people who doubted them, still be days when the money was tight, or the job was stressful, or the memories of those they'd lost felt too heavy to carry. But they would face it together, Daniel and Claire and Maya, their improbable little family built from rain and grief, and the courage to stop when stopping seemed impossible. They would fix what was broken, maintain what was worth keeping, and build something new from the pieces of their old lives. And on quiet nights, when the city slept and the snow fell softly outside, Daniel would sometimes think about that October evening, about the choice he'd made to pull over, to offer help, to see another person's need as more important than his own convenience. It was such a small thing, really, a kindness that took 15 minutes and cost him nothing but time, but it had changed everything. Because sometimes the most important moments in life don't announce themselves. They don't come with trumpets or warning signs. They come disguised as ordinary choices. Do you stop or keep driving? Do you help or look away? Do you risk connection or stay safe in isolation? Daniel had stopped. And in stopping, he'd found not just a job or a relationship, but a whole new way of being in the world. A way that honored Catherine's memory while building something new. A way that gave Maya opportunities beyond what he could provide alone. A way that let him be both the fixer of broken things and someone who deserved to be whole himself. The rain had long since ended. The storm had passed. But the man who'd stopped that night and the woman who'd needed stopping for, they remained. Building their life together, one day at a time, one choice at a time, one act of deliberate kindness at a time. And in the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.